The Guru in America: The Influence of Radhasoami on New Religions in America. Written by Andrea Diem. Narrated by Jack Heinritz. Introduction. Since its relatively humble origins in Agra in the mid-19th century, Radhasoami has emerged as a significant transnational religion with millions of adherents. Juergensmeyer and Lane estimate that presently worldwide there are 2 to 4 million followers of Radhasoami, which includes members from the Beya Satsang, Sawan Kirpal Mission, Dayal Bagh, Swami Bagh, and other minor branches. Although the largest concentration of Radhaswamis is found in the Punjab and Uttar Pradesh, there are roughly estimated 50,000 initiated followers of Radhasoami in the United States alone, with a much larger number of interested seekers. What is perhaps even more remarkable are the numerous groups in North America which have broken off from Orthodox Radhasoami, but which have nevertheless retained many of its ideas. Groups such as Ekankar, for instance, now number their followings in the tens of thousands and continue to show steady growth around the world. While Radhasoami has become a major transnational religion and a dynamic force in the development of new religions in North America, very little work has been done in detailing this. Outside of Juergensmeyer's groundbreaking study, Radhasoami Reality, Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, and the in-house Beya's publication, Dawn of Light, there is virtually no information about how Radhasoami gathered thousands to its various branches, how it has been transplanted into American soil, and how it has impacted the spiritual marketplace here. In this study, the main objective is to provide this information, especially focusing on how Radhasoami has played an instrumental role in the development of new American religious movements, especially focusing on how Radhasoami has played an instrumental role in the development of new American religious movements. In fact, it can be argued that no other new Indian religion has had a greater impact on transforming the emergence of new religions in the United States in the past 50 years. The following is a chapter breakdown of this work. In Chapter 1, I will outline how Radhasoami emerged as a major religion. I will also delineate the various branches in India and elsewhere, which have had a direct and acknowledged relation to Radhasoami's early days. In Chapter 2, I will document the history of Radhasoami in America from the early part of this century. My hope is that such a historical outline will help frame and contextualize how Radhasoami has directly impacted on the development of otherwise indigenous American groups, for example, Ekankar and MSIA. In Chapter 3, I will show how Radhasoami influenced Kirpal Singh's Ruhani Satsang, and how, in turn, Ruhani Satsang directly impacted on the teachings of one of the most successful new religions of the 1960s, Ekankar. What is perhaps most interesting about this transnational genealogical connection is that Paul Twitchell, the founder of Ekankar, attempted to disconnect his life and work from his long association with Kirpal Singh and Ruhani Satsang. In doing so, Twitchell endeavored to establish Ekankar as something non-Indian, despite the fact that most of his terminology and writings stemmed primarily from Radhasoami theology, although, as we shall see, he did make some obvious alterations. By concentrating on this recent cultural transfusion, it helps shed light on how religions evolve from other religions, while both integrating their ancestors' influences and, to greater or lesser degrees, denying them. In Chapter 4, I will investigate 2 American guru movements, Dr. Bhagat Thin's Sikh Study Group and John Roger Hinken's MSIA, both of which have developed quite unique versions of Shabd Yoga. While these groups have genealogical connections with Radhasoami and share some similar theology with it, they have also taken certain pregnant Radhasoami ideas and modified them in their own distinct ways. Such religions are of particular interest to historians and sociologists of religion because they clearly demonstrate how theological concepts can be divorced from their cultural and social moorings and thereby be transformed by new groups in a new social setting. By looking closely at this phenomenon, we may then begin to get a deeper understanding of how certain religious ideas evolve over the course of time and geography. In Chapter 5, I will concentrate on 3 smaller guru movements, which I call virtual groups. These groups are important not only because they contribute to the plurality of religion in America, but also because they give us an opportunity to look firsthand at groups at very early stages in their growth. Of course, I am not absolutely certain that these organizations will not evolve over time to become well-known entities, but at this stage at least, they are relatively small and unknown. However, what is common to each of these virtual groups, Jerry Mulvin's The Divine Science of Light and Sound, Gary Olson's Master Path, and Michael Turner's The Sonic Spectrum, is that they were once connected to Ekankar but have now distanced themselves. What is perhaps most intriguing, though, is that in disconnecting with Ekankar, these organizations have, to greater or lesser degrees, attempted to reconcile their teachings with Radhasoami theology, although developing their own unique version of it, illustrating once again the fluidity of religious ideas. As a phenomenologist, I have been careful not to describe these new religious movements in America as deviant aberrations of an orthodox Indian group. Rather, I agree with Rodney Stark and William Bainbridge that religion has been quite dynamic throughout history, with groups actively influencing each other. Indeed, religions can evolve from other religions as they integrate core concepts and transform others to fit more properly into their new social milieu. It is this very process that interests me. For my research, I have employed 2 primary methods: field research, including observation and interviews, and socio-historical/textual analysis. Besides visiting the major Radhasoami centers in North India and interviewing members and 2 Radhasoami leaders, Charan Singh and Darshan Singh, both of whom have since passed away, I have also visited several Radhasoami and Shabd Yoga-related centers in California. In analyzing the data collected from field research and written sources, my primary interest has been to ground religion in material culture, utilizing the methods of sociology of religion, sociology of knowledge, and sociology of culture, though being sensitive not to simply reduce it down to materialistic underpinnings. Overall, I have only touched upon some of the major and more obvious examples of Radhasoami's impact on new religions in North America. As such, it may serve as a framework for future studies that can further elaborate upon the relationship between Radhasoami and North American religions. Chapter 1. The Emergence of Radhasoami as a Transnational Religion. When Shiv Dayal Singh, the proclaimed founder of Radhasoami, first came out publicly in 1861 with his teachings, surely no outside observer would have imagined that he would be eventually responsible for an international movement which has today garnered well over 2 million followers. Part of the reason why nobody would have expected such a thing to occur was primarily because Shiv Dayal Singh did not attempt to vigorously proselytize for new recruits. Indeed, he was circumspect about gathering disciples, demanding that whoever he initiated be steadfast in following a strict vegetarian diet maintaining a high moral life, abstaining from alcohol and drugs, and engaging in 2 hours plus daily of reshaped yoga meditation. Naturally, such requirements precluded a massive following in the beginning of Shiv Dayal Singh's ministry, especially when he forbade systematic advertisements for his newly founded satsang in Agra. What eventually transpired in Agra, however, was nothing less than remarkable. Starting with just a handful of disciples in the mid-1850s, Shiv Dayal Singh, more popularly known as Swamiji Maharaj, began to attract hundreds of disciples both from within and outside of Agra. Before his death in 1878, Swamiji's following is estimated to have been in the low thousands, with numbers ranging from 4,000 to 10,000 initiates. There are, to be sure, several factors which allowed Swamiji's satsang to flourish. Outstanding among these were 1. Relative freedom of the British Raj to allow neo-Hindu movements to develop. 2. The popularity of alternative spiritual practices, like Shabd Yoga, which could be practiced by any caste member. 3. Prominent disciples like Rai Saligram, who interested others in their guru. And 4. Shiv Dayal Singh's perceived charisma. Whatever combination of circumstances led to Shiv Dayal Singh's core following, it is evident that his initial constituency was solid and devoted. However, after his death, since there were no clear and univocal guidelines given about his successor, several disciples emerged as would-be successors. This led to a major split in the group which has never been mended. It also led, ironically, to the rapid development of the Radhasoami movement outside of Agra. Shiv Dayal Singh's teachings were carried on by at least 6 successors. Radhaji, Swamiji's wife, who established her satsang at Panigali; Rai Saligram, who founded his satsang in Pipalbandi; Sanmukh Das, who initiated sadhus at Swami Bagh, who started his satsang in Sarai Rohila, Delhi; Partap Singh, Swamiji's younger brother, who continued the satsang at Swami Bagh; and Jaimal Singh, who established his satsang at Beas in the Punjab. It seems likely that Shiv Dayal Singh's satsang would have remained relatively unknown in India if it had not been for the proliferation of his successors after his death. What each successor did, in effect, was establish a new center by which Shiv Dayal Singh's teachings could be promulgated. This, in turn, guaranteed that Radhasoami teachings would reach more and more people, even if each center had a slightly nuanced interpretation of Radhasoami doctrines. At first, during the 20 or so years after Shiv Dayal Singh's death, Rai Saligram's satsang was the most popular, eventually eclipsing his own guru's total numbers. The other satsangs were also relatively successful, particularly Jaimal Singh's in the Punjab, but they did not rival Saligram's in terms of absolute numbers. Saligram was instrumental in organizing Shiv Dayal Singh's teachings into a cohesive theology. He was chiefly responsible for publishing his guru's main text, Sarbachan, both prose and poetry, and for clearly articulating Radhasoami as an incarnational religion, nay, the supreme religion of all time. Although Saligram's theological interpretations of Radhasoami eventually led to a schism in the movement, he was nevertheless the key architect behind distinguishing Swamiji's message from other Nirguna Bhakti sants. Saligram achieved this by emphasizing Shiv Dayal Singh's unique character, arguing in one case, for instance, that Swamiji had no guru and was the greatest spiritual master of all time. What this did for Saligram's version of Radhasoami was demarcate it as something transcending mere santism, Radhasoami was, to be sure, entrenched with Sant doctrines, and even Sant lineage. Shiv Dayal Singh had close ties with Tulsi Sahib, but according to Saligram, it transcended altogether those affiliations. He argued that Swamiji was presenting a wholly new message to the world, one that did not rest upon the previous revelations of Sants like Nanak or Kabir, but was rather unique to him. Swamiji, according to Rai Saligram, was the first complete incarnation of the Supreme Being ever manifested on earth. Now it should be noted that not all of Shiv Dayal Singh's other disciples and other rival successors agreed with Saligram's theology. Jaimal Singh was particularly critical of Saligram and his absolutist posture toward their deceased guru. Yet Saligram's theology, however disputed, was instrumental in distinguishing Shiv Dayal Singh and his emerging path from being too closely tied with lesser organized and lesser known Sant-related movements like the Satnamis or Tulsi Sahibis. What Saligram did for Radhasoami was similar to what St. Paul did for Christianity when he attempted to distinguish it from its Jewish moorings. Saligram let it emerge as a distinct religious tradition which, like Christianity, owed much to its predecessor but nevertheless evolved into an autonomous movement. Thus the emergence of Radhasoami from a local guru sect in Agra to a growing religious movement numbering thousands of followers resulted partly because of its splintering into several factions right after the death of its founder, Shiv Dayal Singh. It can be argued that Radhasoami owes much of its growth to its tendency to have multiple guru successors, even when those successors vehemently disagreed with one another over issues of legitimacy and authenticity. Clearly, the most successful Radhasoami branch in the world is the Beas Satsang, with a following that surpasses all of the other satsangs combined. Jaimal Singh established his ministry in relative obscurity in the 1890s. The Beas Satsang, though, would not have even started had there been only one successor to Shiv Dayal Singh which was universally accepted in Agra. It was precisely because there was more than one successor to Shiv Dayal Singh that allowed for groups like Beas to begin in the first place. Although succession schisms can eventually wear down a religion's growth later on, it does seem to have some potential benefits at the beginning, not the least of which is competition. Perhaps having a spiritual marketplace where potential seekers can choose from a host of slightly different gurus is conducive for a new religion to spread its teachings far and wide in a comparatively short period of time. Radhasoami is surely a case in point, since it has never been unified and has never shown any type of consistent harmony. Thus, by the turn of the 20th century, Radhasoami had splintered into at least 6 major camps, with several minority groups emerging. These included Pipal Mandi, the Allahabad Satsang, later to be known as Swami Bagh when it moved back to Agra proper, the Beas Satsang, eventually headed by Sawan Singh, the Tarn Taran Satsang, headed by Bhaga Singh, the Sarai Rohila Satsang, headed by Garib Das, and Shiv Brat Lal's Lahore Satsang. Hence, within just 25 years from Shiv Dayal Singh's death, Radhasoami gurus and their teachings had spread throughout North India, mostly as the result of an increasing factionalization within the movement. By the turn of the 19th century, certain Radhasoami leaders in Agra wanted to curtail the increasing factionalization and its attendant infighting. The most prominent leader in Agra at that time was Brahm Shankar Misra, the disputed successor of Rai Saligram. He formed a central administrative council in 1902 with the help of several prominent Agra satsangis, including Swamiji's younger brother Pratap Singh. The aim of the council was to unify the various branch organizations under a centralized administration in Agra. The result of this endeavor, however, was disastrous. As Mark Juergensmeyer notes in his study, Radhasoami reality, the idea of a council never really worked. From the outset, Jaimal Singh rejected the authority of Misra to give initiations, balked at the notion of turning over his records to the council, and refused to be subjected to its judgments. Thus, instead of the council leading to a reunification of Radhasoami under one president and one guiding body, it led to even more schisms, including the most acrimonious one in Radhasoami's history, the split between Kamta Prasad Sinha and Maheshwari Devi / Babu Prasad Sinha. This split later evolved into a contentious and decades-long lawsuit between Dayal Bagh and Swami Bagh, the genealogical descendants of the original divorce, over worship rights at the Samad of Radhasoami's founder, Shiv Dayal Singh. What such divisions did for Radhasoami's growth is perhaps the opposite of what our common sense might at first suspect. It would seem on the surface that a group's survival, especially if it is still in its infancy, depends more or less on keeping its unity and focus. But this is not always the case. And this was certainly not the case in any stage in Radhasoami's collective history. Contrary to our common-sense notions of how successful religions evolve over time, Radhasoami and groups like it grow exponentially by being periodically hammered by fractionalization. In other words, the proliferation of gurus and outlying satsang groups appears to be a very viable way to spread its teachings quickly and comprehensively. To draw a limited analogy from molecular biology, new religions can succeed if they are able to replicate themselves in many different fashions, even if those same replications break away eventually from the very nucleus from which they started. Therefore, to understand the emergence of Radhasoami as a transnational religion, one must first understand that the group from its very inception was prone to produce offshoots, which in turn produced further offshoots, and so on. What keeps Radhasoami so vital and so popular today, I would argue, is not its unity or its systematic doctrines, but rather its inclination for diversity. That diversity is primarily in the form of new gurus, new satsangs, and new teachings. To be sure, there are certain core features which seem to be recurrent within each succeeding guru and group, but there are new and fresh nuances which allow Radhasoami to adapt to its newfound environment. The following is a schematic outline of exactly how Radhasoami has flourished by its diversity, and how, in turn, it developed into a transnational religion. First, geographical displacement. The first requirement for a local guru movement to move beyond its neighborhood is such an obvious one that it seems a bit silly to even mention it: geographical displacement. That is, the guru and his or her ministry must either attract followers from outside or have their core constituency spread the teachings beyond their particular locales. In the case of Shiv Dayal Singh, both events occurred. He attracted followers from outside of Agra, and also had followers spread his teachings to major cities in North India. Yet even this is a relatively slow and cumbersome method, especially if all lines of influence must intersect with the original center in Panigali, or Swami Bagh in Agra. But after the death of Shiv Dayal Singh in 1878, all of this was changed because there were now multiple successors, each of whom established different ministerial bases. Thus, instead of one line of intersection, there were now at least 6. And after the death of these successors, there were even more offshoots, each of which in turn bred more branches. The outcome is that today it is almost impossible to accurately track down all of the Radhasoami-related groups in India, much less the world. The number of Radhasoami-related gurus are well over 100, and even that number is a conservative underestimation. For instance, in Arizona, in the United States, a place thousands of miles removed from Agra, There are now at least 5 Americans who claim to be living gurus in the Shabd Yoga tradition with a genealogical or theological connection with Radhasoami. If Arizona has that many gurus, one can only guess how many the Punjab or Uttar Pradesh has. So geographical displacement serves as a catalyst to allow new gurus to set up shop. It is as if Darwin's understanding of the origin of species also applies, although in a limited and perhaps merely metaphorical fashion, to the origin of new gurus. Space limits competition, allowing for only a limited number of winners. In our case, the access to more space, to new towns, to new cities, to new states, to new countries, allows for a lot more winners, and temporarily at least, a lot less head-to-head competition. This has certainly been the case for Radhasoami, where the most successful groups have been those that have conquered new territory. The Beya satsang is now completely separated from the parent satsang at Swami Bagh, but it nevertheless boasts 15 times more followers than its predecessor. Even a marginally connected satsang like Master Ching Hai's, she was initiated by Thakar Singh but later denied it, has more disciples than Dayal Bagh, Swami Bagh, and Pipal Mandi combined. And she started her ministry in Taiwan. Clearly, Ching Hai's success has much to do with her ability to tap into a market which has not yet been touched by other Shabd Yoga gurus. Indeed, the vast majority of her following have never even heard of the name Radhasoami or Sant Mat. The fact that Ching Hai's books are available in Chinese and Vietnamese has allowed her to reach a large audience that would otherwise not have access to Sant Mat-related teachings. What we have here, of course, is extensive replication, but replication aided by geographical displacement. With such an abundance of space, at least for the foreseeable future, Radhasoami-related gurus have more or less free rein to mark out their chosen area and make some significant headway. This has happened even in places like Lagos, Nigeria, where a guru named Bambi Baba, yes, the name is real, who was once a follower of an Indian Radhasoami guru, now commands thousands of devotees. Here is a partial listing by geographical location of the more visible Radhasoami-related movements in the world. Keep in mind that the list represents less than 10% of all Radhasoami groups. In Agra, Uttar Pradesh, India, Swami Bagh, Dayal Bagh, Pipal Mandi. Delhi, India, Kirpal Light Satsang, Sant Bani, Sawan Kirpal Mission. Punjab, India, Radhasoami Association, Tarn Taran, Dera Baba Jaimal Singh, Beas, Radhasoami, Firozpur, Manavta Mandir, Hoshiarpur. United States, Ruhani Satsang Incorporated, Anaheim, California, Sonic Spectrum, Tucson, Arizona, Master Path, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Ekankar, Minneapolis, Minnesota, MSIA, Los Angeles, California, Sant Bani Ashram, New Hampshire, The Divine Science of Light and Sound, Scottsdale, Arizona. Secondly, the Gutenberg Revolution printed books. The first Radhasoami book to be widely published and circulated was Shiv Dayal Singh's Sarbachan Radhasoami Chanband in 1884. This book was instrumental in spreading the teachings of Radhasoami to hundreds of people throughout India. Indeed, it can be argued that the reason Shiv Dayal Singh's teachings became popular in the first place was due to Saligram's persistent efforts to set into type what had only been available to a close coterie of disciples via letters and word of mouth. What the Gutenberg Revolution did for Christianity is well known, but what it has done for fledgling guru movements is less documented. Radhasoami's rapid spread throughout India is due in part to Saligram's efforts to print his guru's teachings in accessible Hindi. Even Saligram himself started a fortnightly journal entitled Prem Patra, which carried elements of his guru's teachings as well as his own. What this accomplished was twofold. First, it empowered distant satsangis who did not have access to their guru's daily satsang to share in and understand his teachings. Second, it allowed outlying satsangs to be conducted by chosen representatives who could utilize the growing literature as a basis for their talks. Thus, by this very simple means, Radhaswami was able to move beyond its parochial boundaries and find an audience throughout India and eventually throughout Europe, North America, and elsewhere. There is still something magical about the printed word. It lends credentials and legitimacy to those who may possess neither. Perhaps the quickest way for a guru who has no clear appointed title to garner one is to write and print a book. Once a book is printed, it lends a certain aura of respectability to the guru and his or her ministry, even if that guru has absolutely no legal basis for claiming the title of Sant or Maharaj or Satguru. I would argue that this modus operandi for legitimacy is much more prevalent among would-be gurus in the Radhaswami tradition than most insiders would suspect. For instance, the most prolific author in Radhaswami's history was Shiv Brat Lal, who is reputed to have authored over 3,000 separate articles, pamphlets, and books on Radhaswami. He was also one of the more successful gurus in the tradition from the 1920s to the late 1930s. Yet Shiv Brat Lal admits that he met his guru Rai Saligram only 3 times in Agra. However, how is it that Shiv Brat Lal, who, by his own admission, spent very little time with his guru, became regarded as a major player in Radhaswami circles? By almost all accounts, he was not appointed by his guru to act as a master, nor did he receive any of his guru's property, often a key element in solidifying the status of a would-be successor. In other words, how did Shiv Brat Lal rise to prominence? The answer appears to be his widely circulated publications. Indians read his books, and authors of books carry their own unique credentials. Naturally, Radhaswami gurus are no different. Shiv Brat Lal is also not an isolated example. Paul Twitchell, one-time disciple of Kirpal Singh of Ruhani Satsang, an offshoot of Radhaswami Satsang Beas, started his own religion, Ekankar, by writing about it in various psychic and spiritual magazines such as Psychic Observer and Orion. By publishing his self-proclamations in widely read articles and books, Twitchell, in a way, created a form of legitimacy, a form of verifying his authenticity. Today, each Radhaswami branch boasts of their own publications, and seldom do any of the branches sell the literature of other groups. Each branch, from Dayal Bagh to Sawan Kirpal Mission, publishes nicely bound volumes containing the teachings of their respective gurus. The Beas Satsang sells over 100 titles in several different languages and has launched a well-organized campaign to place several of their English titles in libraries around the world. Ironically, the overwhelming majority of Radhaswami literature is in English, which is another partial explanation for why Radhaswami has so easily and quickly spread beyond its Agra origins. Not unlike international business transactions, which are usually conducted in English, a large number of Radhaswami organizations have chosen to use English as the primary medium to spread their teachings. Thirdly, initiation by proxy. Generally, when a disciple receives initiation from his or her guru, it is conducted in person, one-to-one. However, when a guru begins to gather larger numbers, it is not uncommon to have a communal initiation ceremony where the guru personally conveys namdan, giving of the name, to several neophytes at once. Furthermore, when the guru begins to attract followers from outlying districts, he or she may rely on others in the circle to convey instructions on his or her behalf. This is usually termed initiation by proxy. It appears that Shiv Dayal Singh approved in his lifetime that certain disciples could convey initiation by exactly this method of proxy. Apparently, Swamiji allowed for some new initiates to receive their instructions by means of one or more of his duly appointed representatives. Although it does not appear that Swamiji's appointed representatives were part of an organized clique, the fact remains that this one innovation, initiation by proxy, proved to be the key reason why Radhasoami emerged as a transnational religion. Whereas in former days a neophyte was required to take instructions directly and personally from the guru, Shiv Dayal Singh and his successors streamlined this process by allowing initiations to be conveyed both by mail and by appointed representatives. What this did, of course, is decentralize Radhasoami and allow for a much quicker spread of its doctrines. By the turn of the century, some 22 years after Shiv Dayal Singh's death, initiation by mail, where the new initiate would receive instructions about meditation through printed instructions, was commonplace. Later, this initiation by proxy would eventually empower certain disciples in Radhasoami and elevate them to a status of honor among satsangis. This has been especially true in Radhasoami satsang Beas-related movements, where the designated representative serves more or less as a mouthpiece for the guru and receives in turn much of the respect that the guru would receive if he or she were present. What may not be so readily apparent is how initiation by proxy sets into motion social hierarchy, especially in groups that on the surface disdain such bureaucratic notions. Thus, even in satsangs where only the guru is believed to hold absolute and exclusive power, his or her designated appointees nevertheless receive tremendous respect and affection. This, paradoxically, leads to a whole series of personal and social complications where the spiritual seeker finds himself or herself trying to jockey for some perceived status within the community, even though such ploys are looked down upon in the official literature. The late Maharaj Charan Singh of Radhasoami Satsang Beas offers us an inside view on the political intrigue that can occur when a guru movement gets large. If I have any problem with satsangis, I think I have only this problem. Sometimes they do become jealous of each other. I have had personal experience of many such situations. For example, I remember in India when I go to a home they all love me and I, of course, love them. I ask for a glass of water. 6 or 7 persons run out and bring a glass of water each. I do not know from who to take water. I know that the others will feel jealous, so I just excuse myself, saying that I think I do not need it. These are very petty things, but they go a long way. I know my people. I was not conscious of these things in the beginning, but now I think I am quite trained for these things. Earlier in the same section, Charan Singh comments on why such jealousy occurs. Jealousy comes when we have organizations, administration, and offices like secretaries and presidents. When we start thinking about the offices, then we sometimes become victims of all these things. What Charan Singh is reflecting upon, of course, is the downside of when a group gets large. Limited access to the guru means that those individuals who do have access, even if just a bit more, gain social status, especially in a community where the guru is seen as God. Thus, proxy initiation has allowed Radhasoami to develop communities beyond the guru's ashram, communities, that is, where disciples find social cohesion under the direction of the guru's representative. This has happened to greater or lesser degrees with almost all of the Radhasoami groups that have international centers. Perhaps the most illustrative example of this is Sant Bani Ashram in New Hampshire, that was headed by Russell Perkins under direct orders of Kirpal Singh. Because Perkins was in such a powerful position, at least to satsangis in that group, he had the opportunity to influence a large number of disciples after Kirpal Singh's death to pay allegiance to Sant Ajab Singh of Rajasthan. Without Perkins' credentials, read social position in Ruhani Satsang, it would be difficult to understand why he was so pivotal in developing the fledgling guruship of Ajaib Singh, who was by all accounts a relatively obscure claimant to Kirpal Singh's ministry. Hence, initiation by proxy brings into being positions of power which in themselves can alter the future development of Radhaswami-related doctrines. Indeed, it may well be that these very intermediate points of power lend themselves to potential guru movements which may later splinter off on their own. This has already been demonstrated in several cases, particularly Ruhani Satsang Incorporated in Anaheim, California. Chapter 2. The History of Radhaswami in the United States. The evolution of religion is directly connected to the evolution of communication technologies. To understand the limits of the latter is also to understand the limits of the former's potential for growth. Thus, all histories of religion are to some measure histories of human development, especially as it relates to the transmission of information. That this is obvious is one thing, from speech to written words, to printed books, to radio, to television, to worldwide computer networks. But that it is rarely focused on in appraising how new religions develop is quite another thing altogether, and is something which should not be neglected in any history, religious or otherwise. The history of Radhaswami in the United States is a case in point. Why? Because in many ways the growth of Radhaswami in countries outside of India has been hitched, for better or worse, to the advancement of technology. Even within Radhaswami circles this is well known, as evidenced in the introduction to an in-house Beya Satsang publication entitled Dawn of Light, wherein the author writes that the great advances made in communications have led to the worldwide spread of shopped yoga teachings, especially in Europe and North America. At each stage where there has been a technological revolution, there has been in turn an influx of new initiates to the Radhaswami path. To be sure, Radhaswami masters have not necessarily explained away such increased numbers to better telephone networks, but they have been well aware of how the evolution of the communication industry has led to new opportunities to advance the message of Sant Mat. Equally related to this, of course, are political regimes. For example, when the Soviet Union officially banned religion, it had an amazingly chilling effect on the growth of new religions. Therefore, it is not at all surprising to learn that Radhaswami had made very little headway there until the latter part of the 1980s. Today, of course, Russian society has seen a great increase in the number of new religions and new converts. Throughout the history of the United States, on the other hand, religions, including alternative ideologies, have generally prospered, perhaps due to America's enlightenment principles of tolerance and individualism, coupled with a laissez-faire type government. Specifically, Eastern religions have been quite successful in the United States. To fully understand the reasons for this, several historical and political factors must be considered. First of all, a fertile soil for Eastern ideas was sown when Indian literary material became available to the West through the translations of 19th-century British scholars like Sir William Jones, Charles Wilkins, and Sir Edwin Arnold. American transcendentalists were attracted to these newly translated Indian writings and incorporated in their philosophy Eastern idealism with nature mysticism and Western individualism. A major step for Eastern religions occurred in America when Unitarians, many of whom were transcendentalists, set up the World Parliament of Religions in 1893. Several Indian teachers, particularly Vivekananda and Dharmapala, were well received. Americans seemed to like what they heard, an appealing religious universalism, a non-ascetic orientation, and the idea that they did not have to leave their religion to appreciate or to be affiliated with Eastern thought. Shortly after the World Parliament, many Indian groups began to set up shop in America, including the Vedanta Society in 1894 and the Self-Realization Fellowship in the 1920s. But the doors to foreigners did not officially open until 1965, when L.B. Johnson rescinded the immigration laws set back in the early part of the 20th century, since the United States immigration policy has dictated to a large member the numbers of foreigners who may legally enter the country. It has in turn determined how various cultures will impact on the American melting pot. With the revocation of the immigration laws, immigrants began pouring in, bringing with them their religious and cultural ideas. Among the immigrants were several well-known Indian teachers, such as Yogi Bhajan and Swami Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada. During this time, Radhasoami-related groups also began to experience an exponential growth in their followings. That the immigration laws were dramatically changed in the mid-1960s to the advantage of incoming Indians has no doubt had tremendous effect on shaping Americans' views of things Indian. Today, naturally, almost every major city in the United States boasts of one or more Indian restaurants, which was surely not the case 30 years ago. As we see, there are many worldly realities like communication and politics that spiritual movements must come to grips with if they are to expand. Keeping this important caveat in mind will allow us to ground the history of Radhasoami and other new religions like it in an empirical context, one which allows us to see how a spiritual message can intertwine, albeit distinctly, with a purely material medium. Radhasoami Gurus in America. The first Radhasoami Guru to visit the United States appears to be Shiv Brat Lal, one of several successors to Rai Saligram of Pipal Mandi, Agra. According to Dayal Yoga, in the year 1911 A.D., Datta Dayal, that's Shiv Brat Lal, went on a tour of Japan, America, and other foreign countries. There he also spread the gospel in search of God and discoursed on physiology of the spirit. He did not rest. Coincidentally, it is also from Shiv Brat Lal's lineage that the first bona fide American Radhasoami guru, Dr. Ishwar Sharma, emerged. Although Sharma was born in India, he lived in the United States for over a decade, working as a philosophy professor at several colleges and universities, and succeeded his guru, Fakir Chand, Shiv Brat Lal's chief disciple and eventual successor, after he died in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the fall of 1981. Although much is known about Sharma's ministry, there is very little information about Shiv Brat Lal's visit to America, and what impact, if any, it had on the spread of Radhasoami teachings among Americans. Shortly after Shiv Brat Lal's visit, Dr. Bhagat Singh Thind, an initiate of Sawan Singh of Radhasoami Satsang Beas, and an offshoot guru who did not acknowledge his Beas connection, permanently settled in America and preached a mixture of Sant Mat, Radhasoami, Sikh, and occult doctrines. He was modestly successful in his venture and gathered several hundred disciples. Bhagat Singh Thind also wrote a number of books with Radhasoami-related themes, including his most famous treatise, Radiant Road to Reality. Surprisingly, it would be another 35-plus years after Thind's initial visit when a Radhasoami-related guru visited America. In 1955, Kirpal Singh, founder of Ruhani Satsang and longtime initiate of Sawan Singh of Radhasoami Satsang Beas, visited several cities in the United States during his first world tour. His visit, unlike his two predecessors, has been well documented and was very instrumental in spreading Shabd Yoga teachings throughout the country. It was also during this trip that Kirpal Singh initiated Paul Twitchell in Washington, D.C. 10 years later, Twitchell formed his own group, Ekankar, which was primarily based upon the teachings of Kirpal Singh and Radhasoami. Today, Ekankar is one of the most successful new religions in America, founded in the 1960s. The booklet, As They Saw the Master, Delhi, Rouhani Satsang, 1956, partially documents Kirpal Singh's tour of the United States and elsewhere. It also provides several intimate portraits of Kirpal Singh written by new initiates. Though Kirpal Singh did not attract large numbers to his lectures, in contradistinction with Vivekananda, for example, they were nevertheless well attended, and his tour was quite successful in establishing a permanent infrastructure and network of satsangis. Kirpal Singh again visited America in 1963. This trip was even more successful than his first, with hundreds of people attending his lectures. George Arnsby Jones's book, The Harvest is Rich, The Mission of Kirpal Singh, details much of Kirpal Singh's tour. The book also graphically illuminates how the Indian guru spread his message. Concerning the Washington, D.C. leg of the trip, Jones writes, During a 27-day stay in Washington, Kirpal Singh gave a total of 18 public talks. Some were given at private residences, others at the Friends Meeting House, the Sylvan Theatre, the Theosophical Society, the Perpetual Building, the Washington Post Building, the House of Inspiration in Vienna, Virginia, the Wesley Theological Seminary at American University, Levering Hall at Johns Hopkins University, Bookmont Baptist Church, the Unitarian Church, and the YMCA. 8 further talks of a more informal nature were given at the residence of T.S. Khanna. A press conference held at the National Press Club was attended by representatives of 5 leading newspapers. While in Washington, Kirpal Singh made 5 radio broadcasts, which included a recording made for the Voice of America in English and Hindi for retransmission in India. He also gave a broadcast on the nationwide CBS network and gave complete coverage of his spiritual mission in the world. He made 2 appearances on television, and his message of love and hope reached an even wider audience. Before the Master left Washington for Philadelphia, he was invited to the Capitol and introduced to a large number of senators and members of the House of Representatives. Senator Kennedy, in a long talk with Kirpal Singh, welcomed the aims and ideals of the World Fellowship of Religions. Almost a decade later, in 1972, Kirpal Singh made his last trip to the United States. By this time, he was well known in spiritual circles, and many people, especially those in their late teens and early 20s, came out to see him. This trip, which at one stop saw nearly 1,000 people gather to hear Kirpal Singh, is fully documented and photographed in the publication The Third World Tour of Kirpal Singh, Tilton, Sant Bani Press, 1974. The first Radhasoami Satsang Beas guru to visit America was Charan Singh in 1964. Charan Singh's trip was even better received than Kirpal Singh's, with the Beas guru attracting consistently larger numbers in his audience. This was primarily because Radhasoami Satsang Beas is well established in India and has had roots in America since 1911. Unlike Kirpal Singh's trip, though, Charan Singh's tour was not advertised. The Beas guru also did not publicly present his message the way that Kirpal Singh had done in 1955 and 1963. Indeed, Charan Singh's one and only impromptu television interview on May 28, 1964, with a news reporter in Minneapolis, Minnesota, caused a bit of a stir because it was so unusual. A verbatim transcript of the brief interview and a full account of Charan Singh's travel to America are outlined in the book The Master Answers Audiences in America, Beas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1966. Whereas Kirpal Singh utilized the media, He was not adverse to taking out newspaper and magazine advertisements. Charan Singh, for the most part, resisted it. The reasons for this are complex and stem largely from early Radhasoami history in Agra. Perhaps the chief reason is theological. There is a long-standing belief in Radhasoami that there are marked souls, and only those who are so marked will receive initiation from the Guru. Thus, according to this argument, destiny, not advertising, leads souls to Radhasoami. But even in groups that do not allow any formal type of advertising, like Swami Bagh in Agra, it is perfectly acceptable to publish books and circulars. Hence, it may not be advertising as such that is disdained. A book is in many ways a form of advertising, but rather certain kinds. And it is here where the differences between Kirpal Singh and Charan Singh can be illuminated. It is also here that we can begin to understand the various ways that Shaped Yoga doctrines have been transmitted. When a guru or a group is new and does not have an established following, it may be necessary to promote his or her or its teachings in ways that were previously thought to be too crass. However, when the guru or group does find a niche, he or she or it may then outgrow the former methods of proselytization and assume a more staid or dignified approach. Clearly, Charan Singh and the Beas Satsang did not need to vigorously promote themselves. Charan Singh's monthly satsangs at the Dera attracted tens of thousands of people, and sometimes the numbers reached well over 100,000. When he came to America for the first time, there were already several hundred initiates spread throughout the country. In contrast, Kirpal Singh essentially started his ministry on his own after he disputed the transference of his guru's mantle to Jagat Singh in 1948 at the Dera. Thus, when he came to America in 1955, he could not count upon Beas-affiliated satsangis to show up to his lectures. Even though T.S. Khanna, Kirpal Singh's general representative who lived in Washington, D.C., tried steadfastly to sway initiates of Sawan Singh to Kirpal Singh, only very small numbers of Beas satsangis switched over to Ruhani satsang. Therefore, in several ways, Kirpal Singh was forging new territory when he came to America. For many Americans, he was their first introduction to Shaped Yoga teachings, and as such carried all the pros and cons that an innovative and charismatic leader brings with him. Charan Singh made his second and last trip to the United States in 1970, 6 years after his first visit. Surprisingly, the crowds that attended his lectures this time increased almost tenfold. No doubt there are a number of reasons for this, but one factor that seems pivotal was the baby boom generation. Large numbers of disaffected youth attended Charan Singh's satsangs, just like they had attended the talks of a host of other gurus, including the ever-popular Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Charan Singh himself was well aware of this, and commented that perhaps the youth were revolting against the hypocrisies of materialism and dogmatism. The largest crowd to see Charan Singh was in Pasadena, California, where over 1,500 people attended his talk. This was a remarkable number at the time, especially since there was no public advertising allowed. That California should be the place to draw the largest crowds is not surprising. Since the early part of the 20th century, California has been a sprouting ground for alternative lifestyles. Most Indian gurus have found their greatest success in California, including Paramahansa Yogananda of Self-Realization Fellowship, who permanently settled in Southern California and died at the Biltmore Hotel in 1952. Kirpal Singh's and Charan Singh's trips to America were clearly the most visible and successful of any Radhaswami-related guru up until the mid-1970s. Several other Radhaswami gurus visited America before this time as well. Outstanding among these was Fakir Chand, founder of Manavta Mandir in Hoshiarpur in the Punjab. Fakir Chand made several visits to the United States, presenting informal talks, public lectures, and print and radio interviews on both the East and West coasts. Interestingly, he was also the first Radhaswami guru to die on American soil. During his 5th trip to America, Fakir Chand stayed in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, although he planned to fly to Los Angeles, California, and present a series of talks, sponsored and funded, in part, by John Roger Hinkins of MSIA. He suffered a cardiac arrest and died at the age of 95. His impact has been even greater after his death, primarily due to the efforts of his successor, Dr. I.C. Sharma, who has presented Fakir's teachings in a westernized fashion tailored for a Christian-educated audience. Following Kirpal Singh's death in 1974, there was a succession dispute that led to a major schism in Ruhani satsang. Eventually, several gurus emerged as claimants to Kirpal Singh's ministry. 3 of the most popular of these successors were Darshan Singh, Thakkar Singh, and Ajaib Singh. All 3 gurus have made several trips to America and have been quite successful in garnering new initiates. After the death of Darshan Singh in 1989 and Charan Singh in 1990, their respective successors, Rajinder Singh and Gurinder Singh, some observers are calling it the Inder era, have traveled extensively. Rajinder Singh, the son of Darshan and grandson and initiate of Kirpal Singh, has lived in Chicago, Illinois for many years. Thus, he divides much of his time between the United States and his main Indian center of operations in Vijayanagar, Delhi. Rajinder Singh, who worked as an engineer for AT&T for many years, has expanded upon his father's ministry, doubling the number of initiates within just 6 years. Reportedly, he has close to 100,000 initiates. He has also presented the teachings of Sant Mat in a more westernized version, and has continued in the tradition of his predecessors by advertising his lectures and talks. Gurinder Singh, a nephew of Charan Singh, has already made 2 trips to the United States, first in 1991 and then in 1994. During his last trip, he stayed over for several days in Palm Springs in the middle of July and gave a series of very well-attended talks. Indeed, on one day, the reported attendance was approximately 4,000, by far the largest number ever to attend a satsang by a Radhaswami guru in America. Due to the increase of numbers, Radhaswami Satsang Beas has bought a large piece of property in North Carolina with intentions of building a center for Gurinder Singh's future visits. Unlike Rajinder Singh, who started conducting initiations just weeks after his father's death, Gurinder Singh waited nearly 2.5 years before he initiated anybody. However, even given his late start, he has already initiated over 100,000 people within less than 2 years, a number that is sure to grow into the millions if his ministry is any way comparable to his predecessors. Gurinder Singh's uncle, Charan Singh, initiated over 1,250,000 followers, the largest number ever by any Radhaswami guru in history, and perhaps more than all of the other Radhaswami branches combined. Such large numbers in India strongly suggest that America is still in its infancy in terms of Radhaswami's potential for growth. Perhaps the most obscure visit of a Radhaswami guru to America, outside of Shiv Brat Lal's in 1911, was Teja Singh's in the latter part of the 1980s, where he stayed for several weeks in Orange County. Teja Singh, a successor to Sadhu Singh, represents one of the lesser-known Radhaswami groups in Firozpur. Although Teja Singh speaks very little English, he has a substantial Indian following, numbering in the tens of thousands, and has several hundred devotees spread throughout North America. His visits are usually targeted to Indians living abroad and thus do not receive the attention that other more popular gurus do. Teja Singh's ministry demonstrates that there is not one audience in America, but rather numerable sub-communities. To understand the popularity of Shabd Yoga-related movements in America, one must first come to grips with the demographics of these groups. Why? Because only when we understand the nuances of a certain community will we begin to appreciate why one guru versus another has been successful. Perhaps Ching Hai, one-time initiate of Thakur Singh and founder of her own rapidly growing meditation movement, best illustrates this. Ching Hai has thousands of followers in the Asian community, many of whom cannot speak English and have never heard of the name Radhasoami. That Ching Hai is herself Vietnamese and is fluent in several languages indigenous to South Asia speaks volumes for her quick success in an area otherwise untapped by Indian Shabd Yoga masters. Given the proliferation of Radhaswami gurus in India and abroad, it is difficult to keep an accurate track on all the different lines of development. However, the following list provides some idea of the more prominent contemporary Radhaswami gurus who have either lived in or visited the United States. Thakur Singh, Kirpal Light Mission; Ajaib Singh, Sant Bani; Rajinder Singh, Sawan Kirpal Mission; Gurinder Singh, Radhaswami Satsang Beas; Teja Singh, Radhaswami Firozpur; Harbhajan Singh, Unity of Man; Dr. I.C. Sharma, Manavta Mandir. Although the preceding list is in no way exhaustive, it does indicate the multiplicity of Radhaswami gurus and organizations. Moreover, this list does not include those gurus and groups which have genealogically disassociated themselves from Radhaswami, but which have nevertheless developed their own versions of Shabd Yoga for an American audience. American Initiates. When Indians began to migrate to Canada and the United States, they brought with them living testimonies to their respective religious faiths. One such Indian satsangi was pivotal in the development of Radhaswami in America. In a very revealing autobiographical article, Kher Singh Sasmas, sometimes referred to as Kehar Singh Sasmas, explains how and why he migrated from India to Canada and eventually to America. He also reveals how he came into contact with Dr. Brock, the first American initiate and representative of Sawan Singh. Writes Sasmas, "From adolescence I had a strong interest in seeing foreign lands. In 1904 I took the opportunity to go to Hong Kong via Bengal, Assam, Malaysia, and Singapore. I stayed in the trading center of Hong Kong approximately 30 months. The master made my passage exceptionally easy. I went to Shanghai by boat and then to Japan. From Yokohama our boat crossed the Pacific in roughly 20 days, reaching Victoria in British Columbia, Canada. I found Vancouver to be a very beautiful city with a fair Sikh population maintaining a large Gurdwara. Entering the United States, I went to Bellingham, Washington, and from there to Everett, where I met the former governor, Mr. D.M. Clow. He was greatly impressed by the tenets of Radhaswami faith, but could not give up his dietary habits. In the beginning of 1908, I went to North Yakima and stayed for a couple of months. Close to my residence was the meeting hall of the local Socialist Party that met every Sunday. I, too, was invited to attend a meeting and was questioned about Indian social conditions, as well as rites and rituals of different sects. At the meeting was Dr. H. M. Brock, who later became a satsangi. He asked many questions on Indian religions and was very pleased, as was the audience, by the explanations. The next morning Dr. Brock called and said that his wife was very anxious to see me. He invited me to his office that afternoon. When I came, Mrs. Brock jumped up, and we warmly shook hands. I told her of Radhasoami for the first time, and she had a quick grasp of the teachings. Soon we met regularly and discussed the greatness of a living master. When they both felt convinced of the teachings, they wrote Hazur for acceptance and initiation. Hazur was well pleased with their sincerity and sent them Radhasoami Mat Prakash and discourses on Radhasoami faith, lovingly advising them to study the books carefully. After some time, Hazur, in his grace, authorized the initiation of Dr. and Mrs. Brock. They came to Portland for the occasion. Everything was conveyed to them exactly as directed by Hazur. The Brocks were a loving couple, and the first on whom Hazur showered his grace in America. What is perhaps most interesting from a historical perspective about Kher Singh Sasma's account is that it directly contradicts the recollection of official Beas history. By Sasmas's own admission, he met Dr. Brock at a local Socialist Party meeting. The very next day, he met Mrs. Brock at the doctor's office. Brock was a dentist. However, compare the preceding narrative with the following official visit given in Dawn of Light. One evening, while Kher Singh was walking along a street in Port Angeles, Washington, he was approached by a couple, Dr. and Mrs. Brock. They had seen, floating above his head, a beautiful radiant face with a white turban and white beard. Unable to restrain themselves, they stopped Kher Singh and asked him who this saintly-looking man was. Kher Singh was puzzled at first, but thinking it must be the will of the master to reveal himself to this American couple, he said, "It is my master, Maharaj Sawan Singh Ji." Not satisfied with the brief reply, they were anxious to learn more about the extraordinary sight they had seen. In Kher Singh Sasmus's own written account, he makes no mention whatsoever to the Brock's alleged vision of Sawan Singh floating above his head. Moreover, Sasmas clearly states that he met Dr. Brock at a Socialist Party meeting first, and on the following day met with Mrs. Brock. Why the discrepancy? There may be several answers, but the most obvious one is simple confusion, because later on in Sasmas's account he mentions meeting a Mr. C. Charles, who has an experience very similar to the one recounted in the official Beas version. What has most likely occurred in the collective memory of certain Beas satsangis, and by extension the authorized history presented in several of their books, is that they have conflated the two stories, Dr. Brock's and Mr. C. Charles, into a single story. Keeping the Beas version in mind, as it relates to Dr. Brock, analyze Sasmas's remembrance of Mr. C. Charles. Leaving the couple, the Brocks, in the hands of the master, I returned to Seattle, and from there went to Portland, Oregon. One day I took a boat to a small town nearby, the Dalles. The scenery was beautiful. The boat was crowded, and as people were finding seats, I was asked, "Where are you from?" "I am from India." "Do you have any knowledge of spirituality?" "I have a little, but I am not an adept nor a master." "You know, a spirit has just told me that I should address any questions on spirituality to you. It is on such instructions that I have come to you." I asked the man to proceed. I asked his name. He was Mr. C. Charles, and was on a business trip. In the course of our discussion he informed me that he saw an East Indian, tall and lean, with an angelic countenance, who appeared and disappeared 3 times as we talked. He felt that the man was my master, looking after me in an alien land. He wished that he could meet him. C. Charles's story is so much like the Beas story of the Brox that it is fairly obvious that the names have been crossed. This is significant because the story of the Broxes seeing the radiant form of Sawan Singh has become part of Radhasoami lore. That the story is completely wrong, at least as it relates to the Brox, seems not to have concerned Dr. K.S. Narang, the present head of publications at the Dera. It may be that the story has been told and retold so often that it would be difficult, if nay impossible, to extricate it from the popular imagination of thousands of satsangis. What this episode reveals at a deeper level, however, is the unreliability of history. It also reveals that hagiography may not be so much a conscious reworking of history, but rather a confused recollection of it. It is that very confusion which has led to the juxtaposition of Dr. and Mrs. Brock with Mr. C. Charles. Further in his narrative, Sasma speaks of conducting initiation on behalf of Sawan Singh. This is a turning point in the history of Radhasoami in America because it allows initiation to be done by proxy. Sasmas, under direct orders of Sawan Singh, conveyed the initiation instructions to C. Charles's entire family as well as to the Brocks. Shortly thereafter, the Brocks were appointed to be Sawan Singh's first representatives. As The Dawn of Light points out, while in Canada and America, Kehar Singh also initiated a few other American seekers, as directed by the Great Master Sawan Singh. A few years after their initiation, the Great Master appointed Dr. and Mrs. Brock to initiate accepted applicants, and thus they were the first American representatives of the Great Master. 20 years later, Dr. Julian P. Johnson was appointed to give instructions to persons who may find it more convenient to go to him. Johnson was living in California, a fertile state for spiritual seekers. Johnson's work as a representative was short-lived because he departed to India on March 24, 1932, just 6 months after being appointed and just over 1 year after receiving initiation himself. Julian Johnson, of course, became famous later on for writing the still popular text, The Path of the Masters, that comprehensively outlines the Radhasoami faith. Following in Johnson's footsteps, Harvey Myers, who was initiated by Dr. Brock on June 21, 1931, was appointed Sawan Singh's representative in March of 1933. Myers would serve in this capacity, witnessing the death of 2 gurus during his tenure, until his death in February of 1967, at which time Roland G. de Vries was appointed by the then-present master, Charan Singh, to serve as representative, a position which he still holds to this day as of June 1995. After the death of Sawan Singh in April 1948, his successor, Jagat Singh, appointed another representative to serve along with Myers in the United States. James Replogle was asked to conduct initiations in the Midwest and East, while Myers retained the West Coast. After Jagat Singh's death in 1951, Charan Singh assumed the spiritual mastership at the Dera. It was during his reign that Radhasoami membership saw exponential growth in the United States, whereas there were only several hundred initiates total in America between both Sawan Singh and Jagat Singh. Under Charan Singh's stewardship, there were over 10,000, a remarkable increase by any standard that eventually led Charan Singh to approve a formal organizational body in the United States to oversee administration of the numerous satsangs across the country. As Dawn of Light explains, legally, a non-profit California corporation, the RSSB, Radhasoami Society Beas, is governed by a board of trustees composed of the Master's representatives and 7 satsangis appointed by the Master for specific stated terms. After Charan Singh's death, Gurinder Singh has firmed up the Radhasoami Beas organization worldwide. He has now centralized the appointment of satsang leaders. Gurinder personally approves each and every choice, and has increased the number of satsangis involved in various seva, free service, projects. Undoubtedly, this was necessary because of the increasing numbers and the inherent tendency for small cliques to form that threaten the parent body. This first happened in Radhaswami's history, right after Shiv Dayal Singh's death, that led to the formation of the Central Administrative Council. To avoid such disaffection and splintering in Radhaswami Satsang Beas, Gurinder Singh has tightened up the infrastructure underlying much of the day-to-day activities of the Radhaswami organization. This includes raising the age limit for seekers applying for initiation, 25 for males, revamping the printed initiation instructions, editing local newspapers, personally choosing satsang leaders, building new satsang centers, and traveling extensively each year to countries outside of India. The result is that Radhaswami Satsang Beas is the most organized, yet most popular Radhaswami group in history. The downside, of course, is that Beas lacks intimacy. This is a charge that has been leveled against it ever since Sawan Singh began attracting large numbers in the 1930s. Although Charan Singh and Gurinder Singh have valiantly tried to overcome the depersonalization that accompanies large group settings, both gurus, for instance, personally answer each and every letter they receive and hold open question-and-answer meetings several times a week. The fact remains that it is impossible for a guru to spend quality time with each disciple when he has over 1 million of them. Ironically, these large numbers have opened the door for other gurus with smaller numbers to attract new seekers. Why? Because when confronted with the vastness of Beas and the limited time of Beas's gurus, the would-be seeker may be inclined to seek elsewhere, especially if that seeker desires close personal attention. It can be argued that much of Kirpal Singh's success, for instance, stemmed at least in part from his accessibility. This was also true to some measure with each of his successors, Darshan Singh, Thakar Singh, and to a lesser degree Ajaib Singh. Whereas one would be hard-pressed to recount a story of Charan Singh consistently telephoning his disciples across America at all hours of the day, Darshan Singh was in the habit of having long telephone conversations with his devotees. Even personal meetings with Darshan Singh could last more than 5 hours. Thus, not all disciples, when they learn of Radhaswami, wanted to affiliate with Beas. Some consciously chose more obscure gurus with lesser followings. T.S. Khanna, for example, was initiated by Sawan Singh of Beas, but after his guru's death, he served as Kirpal Singh's first representative in the United States. Khanna has been highly influential in spreading the teachings of Kirpal Singh, and in turn Darshan Singh and Rajinder Singh. Other representatives of Kirpal Singh who played a part were Russell Perkins, who, along with R.N. Stevens, essentially legitimized Ajaib Singh's role as Kirpal Singh's successor. This is intriguing because it demonstrates how important satsangis outside of India have become. In former times, it was American satsangis who looked to their Indian counterparts for guidance. But in the case of Kirpal Singh's hotly disputed succession, which saw tremendous infighting over Darshan Singh's candidacy, Kirpal Singh's Sangat did not expect their guru to appoint his son by a will, the very antithesis, some believed, of Kirpal Singh's own controversial appointment. Certain American and Canadian satsangis played a key role in helping sway blocks of satsangis to certain succession camps. The following are 3 examples. 1. R.N. Stevens from Canada strongly supported Ajaib Singh, but later disavowed him as a fraud, in an important article published at Satsandesh after meeting the guru at his desert retreat, a lead which Russell Perkins from New Hampshire carried through with by fully endorsing the Rajasthan guru as genuine. 2. Radhasoami, who was head of Rouhani satsang in America, disavowed all the claimed successors, though he temporarily supported Madame Hardevi's hand-picked appointee Thakur Singh. Under Radhasoami's direction, Rouhani satsang separated itself from all the rival camps. Today it is a non-profit organization centered in Anaheim, California, which publishes and promotes the life and work of Kirpal Singh exclusively. And 3. Judith Lamblian, an initiate of Kirpal Singh's, declared her own candidacy, alleging to be carrying on her guru's ministry in Salt Lake City, Utah. Kirpal Singh's death led to the proliferation of a number of satsangs, which now have no connection whatsoever with Rouhani satsang or Sawan Kirpal mission. This, of course, is a natural evolution in Radhasoami history, since every succession dispute has been followed by more offshoots that over time develop their own guru parampara, or lineage. However, what is rather new is its repeated occurrence in the United States. Below is just a partial listing of some gurus and groups that have splintered off from more mainstream Radhasoami centers and have established their own movements. Paul Twitchell, Ekankar. Judith Lamblian, Satsang, Salt Lake. Dr. Bhagat Singh Thind, Sikh Study Groups. Walter Baptiste, Yoga Center. John Roger Hinkins, MSIA. Jerry Mulvin, The Divine Science of Light and Sound. Sri Michael Turner, The Sonic Spectrum. Guru Maharaji, Divine Light Mission. Bruce Avanel, Elan Vital. Gary Olson, Master Path. Darwin Gross, ATOM. The Transmission of Words. Although we know that Radhasoami Mat Prakash, by Rai Saligram, published in 1898, was the first English book exclusively devoted to Radhasoami teachings, we are uncertain about what was the first Radhasoami publication to make its way to North America. There are, however, several candidates. Radhasoami Sect in India, a small pamphlet written by H.D. Griswold in 1908 and published in the journal The East and the West. Discourses on Radhasoami Faith, written in 1907, but not completely finished due to the author's death, by Brahm Shankar Misra, the chief successor to Rai Saligram. Max Muller's brief account of Rai Saligram in The Life and Sayings of Ramakrishna, published in 1899. Phelps' Notes, written by an American attorney who talked extensively with Madhav Prasad Sinha, the eventual successor to Maheshwari Devi and the last guru at Swami Bagh Agra. J. N. Farquhar's often cited but historically misleading chapter on Radhasoami in his 1914 book Modern Religious Movements in India. Each of these books, with greater or lesser detail, described Radhasoami teachings. Yet Saligram's Radhasoami Mat Prakash, a small book but quite concise in outlining the salient features of the Radhasoami faith, was perhaps the most widely read text. Julian P. Johnson, who wrote 4 influential books himself on Radhasoami in the 1930s, alleges that Radhasoami Mat Prakash was instrumental in developing his interest in the spiritual path. That the book was authored by a guru from a lineage long since divorced from Beas seems not to have been of great concern back in the 1910s, 1920s, and 1930s. Why? The answer is almost too obvious to warrant discussion. There were no other books available in English that talked about the teachings in such an inviting and precise manner. Eventually, however, with the influx of Beas-sponsored publications, Radhasoami Mat Prakash was taken off the list of recommended readings. Today, most Beas satsangis have never even heard of the book, much less read it, even though it was one of the cardinal texts that early American satsangis used in their spiritual readings. In the 1930s, a number of new Radhasoami books were published, most of which were in English, making Radhasoami much more accessible to a non-Indian market. As noted in the Radhasoami tradition, not until the 1930s, though, did information on the Radhaswamis become more extensively available. In this 10-year span alone, 1930 to 1940, more material was produced than in all the previous decades combined. With this rapid increase came the works of Nicholas McNichol, The Living Religions of the Indian People, 1934, H.D. Griswold, Insights into Modern Hinduism, 1934, Paul Brunton, A Search in Secret India, 1934, and L.S.S. O'Malley's Popular Hinduism, The Religion of the Masses, 1935, all of which, with the exception of McNichol's, contained lengthy sections on the Radhasoami faith. Coupled with this scholarly infusion were several books published by the satsangs themselves. Maharishi Shiv Bratlal's Light on Anand Yog, 1933, several books by Dr. Julian P. Johnson, With a Great Master in India, Call of the East, The Unquenchable Flame, The Path of the Masters, and an unpublished manuscript, More Light on the Path, and a large volume, later divided into two, by Lake Raj Puri, Mysticism, The Spiritual Path, 1933. Since the 1930s, there has been a steady increase of books on Radhasoami. Today there are well over 200 titles in English, with most books being published by the Beas Satsang, Swami Bhag, and the Kirpal Singh-related groups. Ironically, however, the most popular of all Radhasoami books in America remains Julian P. Johnson's The Path of the Masters, that was written in 1939. Johnson's book has been instrumental in leading people to Radhasoami. It has also the infamous distinction of being the most appropriated of any Shabd Yoga text. Chapter 3. The Genealogical Connection, Kirpal Singh and Paul Twitchell. That religions often evolve out of other past religions is a well-known phenomenon. Witness Christianity's emergence from Judaism. What is not so well known, however, is how certain religions try to genealogically disassociate themselves from their historical roots. Ekankar is a classic case in point. Founded in 1965 by Paul Twitchell, one-time disciple of Swami Premananda, Kirpal Singh, and L. Ron Hubbard, Ekankar owes much of its theology to Radhasoami. Indeed, as Lane, Melton, and others have pointed out, most of Paul Twitchell's writings are derived from two Radhasoami publications, With a Great Master in India and The Path of the Masters, both authored by Julian P. Johnson in the 1930s. Certainly it is not surprising that religious doctrines can, at times, appear to be similar, but what is surprising is when a religion which has borrowed much of its history, doctrine, and terminology from another tries to consciously deny its putative association. The story of Paul Twitchell's association with Kirpal Singh, and in turn the influence of Radhasoami on Ekankar, is well documented. In 1955, Paul Twitchell received initiation from Kirpal Singh in Washington, D.C. Twitchell, who, according to his first wife, Camille Ballow Taylor, was a seeker of religion, met Kirpal Singh after a 5-year stay at Swami Premananda's Church of Absolute Monism. Twitchell kept up a 10-year correspondence with Kirpal Singh in India, addressing his numerous letters to his guru as "My Dear Master," and so on. In 1963, when Kirpal Singh visited America for the second time, Twitchell brought his second wife-to-be, Gail Atkinson, to get initiated in San Francisco. The initiation records of both Paul and Gail are on file at Sawan Kirpal Ashram in Vijaynagar, Delhi. Although Paul Twitchell and Kirpal Singh were on friendly terms, There arose a rift between them in the mid-1960s. Apparently, Twitchell sent a manuscript version of his book The Tiger's Fang for Kirpal Singh's approval. Kirpal Singh, however, did not agree with some of the things Twitchell said in his manuscript. Subsequently, Twitchell severed his ties with Kirpal Singh and demanded that his manuscript be returned. In the meantime, Twitchell began advertising for his new spiritual group called Ekankar, the Ancient Science of Soul Travel. What really prompted Twitchell to disconnect from Kirpal Singh has been speculated upon by a number of scholars. Critics contend that it was due to money, and that Twitchell wanted to start his own ministry, unencumbered by the fetters of restrictive Indian moral systems. Followers of Ekankar, on the other hand, contend that Twitchell was a spiritual trailblazer who had been divinely commissioned by the Vairagi masters to carry on the eternal Ek teachings. Whatever one may suspect about Twitchell's motives, one thing is certain. Ekankar draws heavily upon the teachings of Kirpal Singh and other Shabd Yoga masters for its theology. Even the very name Ekankar is derived from Julian Johnson's use of the term in the Path of the Masters. Ek in Hindi means one. Ankar means God or transcendental. Combine the two, and you have a popular Sikh name for God, which is mentioned in Guru Nanak's 15th century poem Japji. Twitchell most likely learned of the name from both Julian Johnson's book as well as from the Sikh scripture. Twitchell simply added a C between the E and K to develop his own unique spelling and to give his organization's name an identifiable distinction. Moreover, Twitchell intertwined Radhasoami doctrines with other teachings he had encountered in his career, including theosophy, self-realization fellowship, Scientology, and occult teachings in general. The result is a fascinating mixture of Eastern and Western mysticism. Twitchell's creation, or revelation, depending on one's appraisement, was a huge success. Today, some 24 years after its founder's death, Ekankar is one of the most successful new religions to be founded during the decade of the 1960s. Ekankar has followers all over the world and numbers its adherents in the tens of thousands. Official numbers have yet to be released by the Ekankar organization. Ekankar has also seen its share of controversies. When Paul Twitchell died, he was succeeded by Darwin Gross, who assumed the title of Living Ek Master. Gross was appointed by Twitchell's widow Gail after she claims to have had a dream where she saw the transference of power. Several months later, Gail and Darwin got married, only to be divorced in the late 1970s. In 1981, Darwin Gross decided to step down and appointed Harold Klemp as his successor. In his resignation, Gross claimed that he was still the Mahanta, but not the living Ek Master. However, just 2 years later, Gross was stripped of even that title when Harold Klemp excommunicated him from Ekankar altogether and banned the sale of all Gross-related publications. The early 1980s was a time of turmoil for Ekankar, but today, in the 1990s, it has weathered the storm and has witnessed a steady increase in its membership. Though Ekankar started originally in San Diego, it has moved its center of operations several times to Las Vegas, to Menlo Park, and finally to its present site in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Ekankar has also had a long history of trying to come to grips with its Radhasoami roots. In the 1970s, a number of scholars alleged that Twitchell tried to cover up his association with previous real-life gurus by creating cover names. For instance, in his earlier publications for such magazines as Orion, Psychic Observer, and Search, Twitchell profusely mentions the name of Sawan Singh, Kirpal Singh, and other well-known spiritual leaders. However, after he started Ekankar, he redacted those names when he reprinted his earlier articles in new books. Twitchell did not change the story or the text as such, but rather switched names from Kirpal Singh to Sudar Singh, from Swami Premananda to Rebazar Tars, from the Holy Bible to the Shariat Ki Sugmad. What Twitchell was attempting to do is fairly obvious. He was trying to rewrite his biography so that it could dovetail with the antiquity of Eckankar's rich, if invented, mythology. In doing so, however, Twitchell had to deny his Radhaswami roots. Why? Because Twitchell wanted Eckankar to be an autonomous tradition which stood apart from his Shabd Yoga cousins. The only glitch, however, is that it was these very cousins which informed and shaped Eckankar's theology. Radhaswami's influence in America has most likely seen its greatest impact through the teachings of Eckankar. Whereas Radhaswami has limited appeal to Westerners because of its strict moral codes and exotic Indian terminology, Eckankar has done away with many of the more rigid ethical considerations inherent in Shabd Yoga, from vegetarianism to sexual abstinence, etc., and tried to make its image more palatable to an audience interested in having out-of-body experiences, or what Eckists like to term soul travel. Moreover, Eckankar charges money for its services and advertises extensively in the print media and occasionally on radio and on television. Eckankar is in many ways an Americanized version of Radhaswami mixed with Theosophy and Scientology. To thousands of Eckists, as members are often referred to around the world, it is an irresistible combination. What is most intriguing about the transfusion of Radhaswami ideas into Eckankar is how certain key concepts get transformed when transplanted from one group to another. The following is a close look at the Radhaswami-Eckankar transfusion. Living Ek Master. One of the strong selling points in Radhaswami is its emphasis on the living master. All Radhaswami groups go to great lengths to argue that a living master is necessary for enlightenment and that past prophets and saints are of absolutely no value in the ultimate salvation, liberation of the soul. Eckankar shares this belief with its Shabd Yoga counterparts, but differs significantly in how much respect and adoration is shown to their leader. In Radhaswami circles, the Guru is seen as God incarnated on earth. Thus, satsangis display tremendous amounts of respect to their respective gurus. In some instances, disciples have been known to drink their guru's saliva, to drink water that has touched his or her feet, and to eat dust where he or she has walked. There is an almost bodily worship of the Guru in Radhaswami. In Eckankar, this is not the case. To be sure, Eckists have high regard for their leader and show him the utmost deference, but they do not, on the whole, worship him in the ways that satsangis worship their Guru. One of the reasons for this difference may stem in part from Twitchell's differentiation of the outer and inner master, sometimes called the Mahatma. The outer master in Eckankar is, for all intents and purposes, a human vehicle, replete with its limitations. The inner master, sometimes called the Mahanta, however, is not limited and is a direct link with the infinite. Although outer and inner master are connected, their ultimate functions are distinct. Eckists on the whole are clear about the limitations of their outer masters. Satsangis, on the other hand, are not, believing as they do that their particular guru is supreme in all ways. Soul travel. All of the Radhaswami branches speak at length about leaving the body at will, or dying while living, or going within. Kirpal Singh, in particular, laid special emphasis on experiencing above-body consciousness, and seeing inner light and hearing inner sound. Indeed, he buttressed his claims for mastership by stating univocally that only a competent master could offer inner glimpses at the very time of initiation. Paul Twitchell seems to have been fascinated with out-of-body experiences. Most of his early 1960s articles, just prior to the founding of Eckankar, talk about bilocation, or the ability to be in two places at the same time. By the time he started Eckankar in 1965, Twitchell had coined a term called soul travel to describe in a nutshell what his path was all about. Although it is clear that Twitchell learned of soul travel from his association with Swami Premananda and Kirpal Singh, in developing Eckankar he modified the term to represent something a bit different than what his original teachers had in mind. In Radhasoami meditation practice, for example, emphasis is placed on achieving out-of-body experiences while one is conscious. Thus, any experiences that are derived during unconscious processes, like dreams and such, are not given much credence. However, the chief method by which Twitchell soul-traveled was by sleeping and having dreams. In his numerous letters to Kirpal Singh, Twitchell repeatedly mentions how he left his body after lying down and going to sleep. Dreams for Twitchell were the gateway to other worlds. Kirpal Singh was suspicious of this modus operandi because in his tradition dreams are extremely unreliable and may not necessarily indicate a higher state of consciousness, but rather a lower one. It was precisely on this point that Kirpal Singh critiqued Twitchell's manuscript, The Tiger's Fang, and which eventually led to their irresolvable rift. To achieve out-of-body experiences during the waking state is a very difficult thing, according to Radhasoami practitioners. To achieve such during dreaming is much more easy, even if much more suspect and unreliable. That Twitchell emphasized the latter and not the former in Radhasoami, an initiate is enjoined to spend not less than 2.5 hours in meditation daily. In Eckankar, the chela, as students are called, are enjoined to do about 20 minutes twice daily of spiritual exercises, proved to be one of the great attractions of Eckankar to new seekers. Since almost everybody dreams, the relative success rate of Eckists is bound to be much higher than those in Radhasoami, where only waking experiences are given value. Whether Twitchell consciously realized this as a marketing tool is unclear, but it is certain that it contrasted dramatically with Kirpal Singh's teachings. Today, dreaming is perhaps the central way for Eckists to experience the truth of their path. The present leader, Harold Klemp, when describing most of his inner experiences, bases them upon his dream excursions. Eckists have also followed suit. The Vairagi Masters. As we have seen in the early history of Radhasoami, lineage is an important legitimizing factor in substantiating the claims of a would-be successor or master. Almost all Radhasoami gurus try to link their putative role with the orders of their predecessors. Radhasoami gurus in general never try to claim that they are masters because of their own efforts, with the possible exception of Shiv Dayal Singh, but that's another issue. Rather, they view themselves as a link in a sacred parampara, guru lineage. When Twitchell founded Eckankar, he likewise attempted to connect his efforts with previous masters. But instead of directly linking with his real-life gurus like Kirpal Singh and L. Ron Hubbard, Twitchell instead invented his ancient lineage entitled the Vairagi Masters. He claimed that there were 970 masters that had preceded him. The very first master in this tradition was Gakko, who brought the true teachings of Eckankar from the city of Retz on the planet Venus some 6 million years ago. Other masters in this pantheon included Rama, Jagat Ho, Yaugel Sakabi, and Phubi Quantz. In the modern era, the two previous masters before Twitchell were Rebazar Tars, a 500-year-old monk who still resides in the Himalayan mountains, and Sudar Singh, a Shabd yoga teacher who resided in Allahabad until his death in the late 1930s. Several scholars have argued that both Rebazar Tars and Sudar Singh are cover names for certain Sant Mat masters, like Sawan Singh and Kirpal Singh. Indeed, Twitchell himself never mentions either Rabazar or Sudar before 1964 in any of his published writings, but does profusely mention Kirpal Singh, L. Ron Hubbard, and others. What was Twitchell attempting to do when he developed, or invented, depending on your affiliation, the Vairagi master concept? Most likely it was a way to legitimize his own role as the living Ek master. It is one thing to claim all by yourself that you are enlightened. It is a lot more impressive, though, to have hundreds of masters preceding you who back up and contextualize your claim. Clearly, Twitchell did not wish to serve as merely a disciple of Kirpal Singh, or a one-time student and press agent of L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology, which he was in the latter part of the 1950s. Twitchell believed that he was a gifted master in his own right. However, instead of acknowledging his previous association with other gurus, he instead denied them and created a biography that is filled with dubious gurus with curious-sounding names. In his study of Ekankar, for instance, Lane has never found any historical evidence to suggest that Sudar Singh is in fact a real person. The same is true, he claims, about Rebazar Tars. The evidence for such beings simply does not exist. Lane, therefore, contends that these masters serve as a way for Twitchell to invoke a double sense of mystery and antiquity, a sense in which Ekankar is connected not to a real historical past, one that can be discerned by scholars, but to a unique mythological one. It is a past that is exclusively Ekankar's. It is also a past that has been trademarked and legally protected in the United States. Conscious Co-worker with Sugmad. In his first books on Ekankar, Twitchell used standard Radhasoami cosmology to describe the inner spiritual planes. He also used Shabd yoga terminology in ways quite similar to their original usage. Over time, though, Twitchell began to redefine many Radhasoami and Shabd yoga terms when he used them in Ekankar. An interesting example is his use of Kirpal Singh's often repeated phrase, derived in part from Sant Mat and Sikhism, about being a conscious co-worker with God. In Kirpal Singh's theology, the ultimate realization is when the soul merges back with God and becomes one with him or her or it. Twitchell also accepts that a disciple must reach the highest plane of consciousness to be God-realized. He differs with his predecessor, however, over the ultimate ontological status of the soul. Whereas Kirpal Singh and Radhasoami argue for a merging in God and a subsequent losing of one's individuality, Twitchell opts for an eternal permanence of the individual that keeps him or her distinct from the ultimate annihilation. Indeed, this is one of the bedrock doctrines in Ekankar's theology, and one which they highlight to accentuate their differences with Eastern mysticism. Although Twitchell uses Kirpal Singh's phrase conscious co-worker, he defines it along a more dualistic and westernized fashion. This is quite significant because it demonstrates that Ekankar is not merely a recapitulation of Radhasoami or Shabd yoga, but rather a creative mixture of many mystical ideas and often with a Western slant. Thus, even though the influence of Radhasoami on Ekankar as a whole is tremendous, It must be kept in mind that many of its doctrines have been transfigured in their Western landscape. Perhaps this is the fate of all religions to some degree, which evolve over time. They get nuanced in ways that are not prefigured when first developed. Eckankar's radical reinterpretation of Radhasoami suggests that religion is always in the process of being co-opted by its successors in ways that may seem entirely incongruent at first. It also suggests that religious ideas are quite fluid and dynamic. The inner planes. Radhasoami has a complex cosmology concerning the physical, mental, and spiritual universes. Following the lead of previous gurus in the Sant tradition, Shiv Dayal Singh described 5 inner planes: Sahansdal Kanwal, Trikuti, Daswan Dwar, Banwar Gupa, and Sachkhand, which a soul must pass in order to reach its ultimate destination. Shiv Dayal Singh has also at times given slight nuances to this basic 5-plane cosmology, with the 2 major variations concerning the region between Daswan Dwar and Banwar Gupa. With the 2 major variations concerning the region between Daswan Dwar and Banwar Gupa, known as Mahasun, the Great Darkness, and the further subdivisions of Sachkhand, which he calls Alak, Agam, and Anami. In the various Radhasoami branches in India, there has been debate over some of these more rarefied distinctions, but overall there is general agreement on the major features of the inner planes. The differences between Twitchell's earlier version and his later standard one are significant, as Lane points out in his book, The Making of a Spiritual Movement. Twitchell's changes include altering which sound one hears in the astral plane. First version, tinkle of bells. Second, revised version, roar of surf. And the soul plane. First version, vina or great sound current. Second, revised version, single note of flute, as well as replacing the various lords or deities. First version, Mahakal, was above Saguna Brahm. Second revised version, the 2 are switched. Although these differences may appear to be trivial to an outsider, to members of Shabd Yoga-related movements they are quite pivotal, since the technical yoga is based upon knowing which sounds to adhere to and which to discard. By a close analysis of Twitchell's writings, it is clear that Eckankar's ideas underwent an evolution from 1965 to 1971. What is not clear is why. Why, for instance, did Twitchell feel the need to modify what had been more or less standard fare in Radhasoami circles for nearly a century? There may be several answers, ranging from the critic's charge that Twitchell needed to develop his own unique brand of Sant Mat, so that he could distinguish Eckankar from its Indian counterparts, and thereby copyright his schema as unique, which he did, by the way, in his work The Spiritual Notebook, to the more sympathetic insider who believes that Twitchell was given revelations that previous Shabd Yoga masters were not. In any case, Twitchell's cosmology is a decidedly different one than his earlier ones, and represents a drastic overhauling of the Radhasoami version. That this evolution occurred within the span of less than 4 years is remarkable. That such an evolution is documented in books is even more remarkable. It suggests, at the very least, that a new religion, and perhaps new religions in general, are much more pliable in their early development than anyone inside or outside the movement may at first suspect. Initiation. Initiation into Radhasoami is regarded as the most sacred event that can occur in the life of a disciple. Theologically, it represents the transference of the soul's tie with Kal, the negative force, over to the Satguru, the positive force. Although there are many different branches of Radhasoami, there are certain common traits to be found in each of their initiation procedures. First, a sacred name. Radhasoami in the case of Agra-related groups, or names, 5 names in the case of Beas-related groups, is given to the disciple as his or her meditation mantra to be repeated as often as possible at the third eye. The disciple is also instructed how to listen to the inner sound, technically known as bhajan, by assuming a certain yogic position, the details of which are considered semi-secret. In some Radhasoami groups, like Kirpal Singh's related movements, Sant Bani, Kirpal Light, and Sawan Kirpal Mission, during initiation there is a meditation sitting in which the neophyte is given the opportunity to hear inner sound and see inner light. Overall, the key feature to Radhasoami initiation is learning the procedure of how to meditate, which includes Simran, repeating names, Dhyan, contemplating at the third eye center, looking either for light or for the form of one's initiating master, and bhajan, listening to inner sound. These 3 features are prevalent, with slight modifications, in all bona fide Radhasoami satsangs. When Paul Twitchell developed Ekankar, he also conducted initiations. Although he borrowed much from his association with Kirpal Singh and Ruhani satsang, like similar instructions how to meditate, he made distinctive changes which transformed the character of the initiation process altogether. Perhaps the most obvious change is that he did away with a singular initiation that is common today in Radhasoami circles. At the maximum, there are 2 initiations given in Radhasoami, instruction in the name and instruction in the sound. Twitchell instead invoked multiple initiations, arguing that for each plane of existence a new initiation was necessary. Since Twitchell did away with his original 5-plane cosmology and replaced it with 12 planes, his multiple initiation also followed suit. Today the official number of potential initiations are 12, with most members of Ekankar ranging from 2nd level to 5th level. In Ekankar's official dictionary, it explains the purpose of these initiations. Inner initiation serves the function of raising the vibrations of the individual to those of the nearest higher plane. The inner initiation may come years after the outer initiation. The first initiation is an inner initiation given in the dream state by the dream master. Sometimes the chela is fully conscious and can remember everything about it. It prepares the chela for the link-up with the X-sound current, the audible life stream. All initiations above the 8th are inner initiations. Twitchell stresses that the first initiation takes place in the dream state where the dream master appears to the chela. Such dream initiations are practically unknown of in Radhasoami circles, though there have been exceptions. Perhaps one of the reasons Twitchell invokes such a modus operandi is because dreams played a tremendous role in his own inner development. Indeed, in most of his accounts about leaving the body, it is clearly implied that such excursions occurred when he was dreaming. Moreover, the second initiation, or first outer initiation, in Ekankar, does not have the same strict prerequisites that are required in Radhasoami. For instance, in Radhasoami there are 4 vows which all the groups, more or less, enjoin. 1. Strict vegetarianism, no meat whatsoever, including eggs. 2. Abstinence from alcohol and any mind-altering drugs. 3. A pure moral life, no sex outside of marriage. And 4. 2 hours plus of meditation daily. In Ekankar, there are essentially no prerequisites in terms of lifestyle outside of giving up smoking and drugs, except that one has to be a paid member of Ekankar for at least 2 years. Finally, Ekankar's initiation ceremony itself is quite different from Radhasoami's. In many ways it is more reminiscent of Transcendental Meditation's ceremony, where one offers a fruit or gift to the initiator, and one is given a name suited to that person's personality. Ekankar does not give out the 5-name mantra of the Beas-related satsangs, nor does it give only one name for all initiations. Rather, there are a series of names that the particular initiator, working on behalf of the master, can give. In sum, Ekankar's initiation is a hybrid of various methods, but one that is most closely aligned with TM and Ruhani satsang. The Sacred Writings, the Shariat Ki Sugmad. Ekankar's most sacred writings, the Shariat Ki Sugmad, Book 1 and Book 2, authored by Twitchell and published in the early 70s, have striking similarities with Julian P. Johnson's 1939 book, The Path of the Masters. Although Twitchell's adoption of lengthy passages from Radhasoami literature empirically illustrates the extent to which he was influenced by Radhasoami, of greater interest, perhaps, are the numerous alterations of concepts and terms which Twitchell invokes, giving insight into how religious ideas evolve. When Twitchell first started writing about Ekankar, he more or less used terminology that was based upon Shapt Yoga. However, he quickly began to take on terms that were not in Radhasoami literature and incorporate them into the larger theology of Ekankar, as witnessed in the Shariat Ki Sugmad. In doing so, he made Ekankar an eclectic teaching, even though its major emphasis was Indian in origin. The term Mahanta is a case in point, although the term usually translates as one who is in charge of a temple or head of an ashram. Twitchell utilized it as meaning the living Ek master. He writes, "The full force of the rod of Ek power and the mantle of the Mahanta are embodied directly in him. All those who come to him in the present age have been with him since their advent into the world. The body of the Mahanta is the Ek, which is the essence of God flowing out from the ocean of love and mercy. This special incarnation of the Sugmad makes an appearance but once every 5 to 1,000 or more years, depending on the part he is to play in a major upliftment of consciousness on every plane." In other words, Mahanta now stands for Radhasoami's Satguru. They are more or less interchangeable in their essential functions, except for the part about manifesting every 5 to 1,000 or more years, which is Twitchell's addendum to the concept. Thus, Twitchell not only uses Radhasoami terms, but he also uses Radhasoami concepts without the terms, preferring to coin his own Indian or Sufi names for his own purposes. There are several examples in the Shariat Ki Sugmad of how he substitutes Indian words for Persian ones, such as referring to God as Sugmad instead of Satpurush, using the term Zikar instead of Simran, and employing the sacred Sufi word Hu as a chant, much like the use of Om in Indian philosophy. Even the title of his book, the Shariat Ki Sugmad, is Persian for the Path of the Masters, although it translates more like the law or path to God. Indeed, most of Twitchell's understanding of Sufi terminology comes directly from the Hazrat Inayat Khan, who Johnson cites in section 11.5 in The Path of the Masters. But Twitchell does something distinct from Johnson. Instead of merely citing Sufi terms, Twitchell incorporates them into his religion while altering their meaning for his own unique theology. Perhaps this is an effort to distinguish his group a bit more from its Indian ancestor. Moreover, while Twitchell may adopt lengthy passages from The Path of the Masters, he tailors them to fit Ekankar, leaving out any material that conflicts with its teachings. A key example of this is when Twitchell utilizes a passage of Johnson's that deals with morality, but he omits an important section concerning the wrongfulness of killing and eating animals. Why? Because, unlike Radhasoami, Ekankar does not require a vegetarian diet. Chapter 4. Reshaped Yoga Connection, Bhagat Singh Thind and John Roger Hinkins. One of the peculiar historical trends rampant in Radhasoami is the large number of gurus and groups in America that have attempted to genealogically dissociate themselves from their original ministries. As we previously noted with Paul Twitchell and Eckankar, there are several reasons for this, but the primary one seems to be related to self-autonomy, the desire both personally and organizationally not to be bound by the restrictions of Indian cultural ideas and morality. While Eckankar is clearly modeled upon Ruhani satsang and much of Radhasoami theology with significant departures, there are other lesser-known groups which have also borrowed from Reshaped Yoga teachings, but which have branched off in ways different than Eckankar. Two of the more popular ones are Dr. Bhagat Singh Thind's Sikh study group and John Roger Hinkins' movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness, MSIA. Interestingly, these two groups have taken opposite approaches. Bhagat Singh Thind, a one-time initiate of Sawan Singh of Radhasoami Beas, denied his association with Radhasoami and instead sought legitimacy through Sikhism. Yet, as we shall see, the material that he taught still remained very close to Radhasoami. On the other hand, John Roger Hinkins, who also distanced himself from his parent ministry, Eckankar, curiously sought legitimacy through Radhasoami, though John Roger, as he is popularly called, was never initiated by Sawan Singh. He claimed that he was. And unlike Thind's group, MSIA's teachings, ironically, diverge significantly from Radhasoami, from its interpretation of the guru to its more relaxed moral requirements. All of this illustrates how religions branch off in their own particular ways, taking on fascinating new shapes. Dr. Bhagat Singh Thind. Ever since Swami Vivekananda made headlines at the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893, Indian gurus and swamis have found an appreciative audience in America. Although only a few gurus attained the successes of Vivekananda, Yogananda, and Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, there were many other lesser-known spiritual teachers who had a direct impact on the development of new religious movements. Perhaps one of the most neglected of all Sikh-related gurus to preach in North America by scholars was Dr. Bhagat Singh Thind, whose career evolved from being a political celebrity to a spiritual teacher. Thind's life work can be seen encompassing three phases. 1. An Indian rights activist, as illustrated by his contentious battle in the courts in 1923 to win an exemption clause for East Indians as being Aryan or Caucasian, and later demonstrated by his French-born wife's continued campaign in California and elsewhere to introduce Indian culture into American life. 2. A Sikh teacher who tried in the 1920s and most of the 1930s to introduce the path of Guru Nanak and his 9 successors to a Western audience. And 3. A Santmat metaphysical master who from the late 1930s to the late 1960s tried to intermingle Radhasoami, Sikhism, yoga, and metaphysics into a unique system with himself as sole mediator. Thus, Thind's career evolved from one of concerned activist to Sikh-inspired teacher with limited personal claims to God-realized master. This evolution is not unique, however, and seems to be similar, perhaps not in content but structure, with other would-be Reshaped yoga teachers in America. As a spiritual teacher, Thind never attracted the kind of attention accorded to his Indian counterparts, like Yogananda, who was his Hindu contemporary. But nevertheless, he did play a significant role in introducing Radhasoami-related ideas to Westerners. When Bhagat Singh Thind started his ministry in America in the 1920s, he did not make it known that he was affiliated with Radhasoami. In fact, in his writings, he refers to himself as a Sikh, despite the fact that most of his teachings correlate directly with Radhasoami ideas. But allegedly, Thind was initiated by Sawan Singh of Radhasoami Satsang Beas. As Kirpal Singh notes, "When I went to America, there was one gentleman, he's passed away now, a Sikh gentleman who was giving talks on payment. His name was Dr. Bhagat Singh Thind. He married a French lady. He was initiated by Baba Sawan Singh, I know, definitely." It is unclear why Bhagat Singh Thind denied his connections with Sawan Singh. Thind's wife and disciples claimed that Thind was initiated by a guru in the Himalayan mountains, a story that appears to be common among those who wish to deny any certifiable historical link. For example, Twitchell claimed to be initiated by Rebazar Tars, a Himalayan monk, though he was actually connected to Kirpal Singh. And Ching Hai, one-time initiate of Thakkar Singh, claims that she also met her Satguru in the Himalayas, but neither provides a name or an address for her mysterious mentor. Perhaps Thind had to divorce his mission from Radhasoami, since he charged money for his services, a requirement forbidden by Sawan Singh and other Santmat gurus. Although very little is known about Thind's life and activities, no formal organization ever developed around his ministry to advertise and spread his teachings. We do know that he self-published a number of books on Santmat, and that these books attracted hundreds of devotees. Thind apparently derived much of his inspiration and formulated much of his ideas, and in some cases almost verbatim paragraphs, for his books from Radhasoami literature. As Kirpal Singh reveals in Heart-to-Heart Talks, in a question-and-answer session with a disciple, the master Kirpal Singh says, when he wrote his first book, Radiant Road, he sent a copy to Baba Sawan Singh. He gave it to me. It was a copy of what I had written. I wanted to meet him, but he always evaded me. I was in America 4 months. I asked for his program, but he would change his program. We never met. He said he never even saw Baba Sawan Singh and never knew that Radiant Road, his book, is the exact translation of a portion of the book I had written. The disciple asks, "Which book? Gurmat Siddhant?" And the master replies, "Exactly." Next question, "What part?" The master says, "Certain portions from the first and second part. I asked Mr. Khanna to approach him. He said, 'He won't receive you.' I went to California. He left his home. I met his wife. When I was there, he went to the east, and when I went to the east, he went to the west, only to hide. He said he was a born master." Next question. "Yes, he said he had no need of a master, that he came directly from God." And the master replies, "This is what I say. And when he came to India, he never met me. So such things are known. After all, the cat is out of the bag, is it not?" And the disciple asks, "He was actually an initiate of Sawan Singh, wasn't he?" The master says, "Definitely, I know, because the first book is the Radiant Road something." And the disciple says, "To reality." The master adds, "He sent it to Baba Sawan Singh. I was there. Master gave it to me. He was in a regiment in Amritsar. Such things, I tell you, are not good. After all, these things come out." While it is true that Thind copied much of his most famous book, Radiant Road to Reality, without attribution, Kirpal Singh is wrong in alleging that it was his writings, Gurmat Siddhant, which served as the original source. Rather, Thind was influenced by Johnson's With a Great Master in India. Indeed, Thind's Radiant Road to Reality is a partial reworking of the Path of the Saints, which forms the last part of with a great master in India. Arguably, Thin's appropriations are similar to Twitchell's. Both have an apparent fondness for early Johnson. But in many ways, Thin's adoptions are more sophisticated than Twitchell's, whereas Twitchell added a number of incongruent ideas to his appropriations. Thin more or less stayed very close to the core of Radhasoami teachings. However, Thin did develop his own unique version of Sant Mat by implementing a few subtle changes, like not invoking any strict requirements for initiation, referring to Sikhism as the source of his inspiration, and charging money for instruction. Curiously, Thin, who follows Johnson's text very closely, strays only when he wishes to add his own emphasis, coin a new term, or avoid a section which may contradict his own ministerial lifestyle. Perhaps the most revealing example of the latter occurs on page 18 in Radiant Road to Reality, where Thin more or less adopts page 186 of Johnson's With a Great Master in India, but he leaves out the following admonition from Johnson. It never begs for money for its support, and even the master himself, giving his whole time to the work, never receives any material benefits from his disciples. In replacement, Thin writes something a bit more nebulous. Its votaries neither ask nor beg nor expect, but fulfill the truths in their lives, and the truths fulfilled fill them full of their substances. Why the redaction? Well, as we pointed out previously with Twitchell, Thin charged money for his instruction and relied upon his students for donations to help support him. That this contradicted a long-standing tradition in Radhasoami may have been the driving force behind why Thin did not continue to appropriate from Johnson in that section, despite the fact that he has no qualms whatsoever from using other sentences which describe Sant Mat. What all of this indicates, of course, is how Radhasoami doctrines were used by Thin but slightly modified for his own purposes. As we see, Bhagat Singh Thin's Radiant Road to Reality has striking similarities with Radhasoami literature. Since Thin's text was popular in metaphysical circles for decades, it seems to have actually served as a beacon for seekers interested in Shabd yoga practices. Indeed, Wave Sanderson and Roland G. de Vries, two of the more influential disciples of both Kirpal Singh and Charan Singh, first came into contact with Shabd yoga practices through their study with Dr. Bhagat Singh Thin. Today, Roland de Vries is a Western representative for Radhasoami Satsang Beas, a post that he has held for almost 30 years. It can be argued that through his literature, Thin was instrumental in serving as a bridge for a number of seekers to cross over to other more established Radhasoami branches. I would suggest that relatively unknown teachers like Dr. Bhagat Singh Thin serve a vital communicative function in religion that is oftentimes ignored by scholars. It may well be that there are thousands of Thins who have very small followings, but who nevertheless act as catalysts for gurus and groups which demand much more public attention. Clearly, Thin's own legacy is obscured by the fact that he lacked the organizational resources that his Indian counterparts, like Yogananda, enjoyed. Thin was more or less a freelance guru and, as such, did not reap the benefits that a secure organization, like Self-Realization Fellowship, would have provided for him. Since he left no organization, appointed no widely accepted successors, and provided in his books little if no biographical information, the new seeker or reader is simply left with a spiritual system that intertwines Sikhism with Radhasoami, while at no place distinguishing the great differences between the two. Yet Thin's ministry is important to study in order to understand Shabdism in North America, since he is perhaps the first among many who tried to incorporate Radhasoami ideas, while not directly acknowledging them, into a more streamlined, westernized path. John Roger Hinkins. It is one of the ironies in religion that when a guru branches off from a center, he or she in turn has disciples who branch off from his or her line, and so on. The outcome is a proliferation of diverging lines of teachers and groups, each of whom in turn spawns new offshoots. Oftentimes, groups differentiate themselves from their offshoots by claiming that their views are orthodox, while the fledgling branch's views are heterodox. The very concept of orthodoxy and heterodoxy, of course, is a social construction, largely dependent upon the politics of power and persuasion. Ironically, the very guru who may at one time be castigated as heterodox, outside of the mainstream and derivative, may in time be regarded as orthodox, especially if someone newer breaks off and starts his or her own teaching. Thus, who's orthodox and who's heterodox is a labeling game that is quite dynamic and time-dependent. Indeed, orthodoxy and heterodoxy are relational terms which always coexist. In other words, you can never find the one without finding the other. Each define themselves at the very time that they define their counterparts. When one calls the other heterodox, it establishes their own peculiar version of what is orthodox. An interesting example of this relational tension between orthodoxy and heterodoxy can be found in Radhasoami's tainted history of guru successorship. For instance, Shiv Dayal Singh is regarded as the pivotal point of all Radhasoami groups. He stands as the axis mundi, the point at which each branch can define its purity. Hence, Shiv Dayal Singh is the foundation of orthodoxy in Radhasoami circles. However, from the perspective of the Tulsi Sahibis, a group founded around the life and work of Tulsi Sahib, the alleged guru of Radhasoami's founder, Shiv Dayal Singh was a branch-off successor and not to be regarded seriously. He was considered heterodox. Today in Radhasoami there are branches that allege to be parental true lineage, casting dispersion on other startups which claim the mantle of Radhasoami surreptitiously. Yet, as we can see, once a group establishes itself for some time, it sprouts imitations that are seen as contrary to the original or true teachings. Thus, Ekankar and groups like it are viewed with great suspicion by the more established Radhasoami branches. But while Ekankar may be regarded as heterodox to Radhaswamis, it regards itself as orthodox to its offshoots, like John Roger Hinkins' MSIA organization. Moreover, while the founder of Ekankar, Paul Twitchell, might be somewhat ambivalent or even insecure about his tenuous connections to Rouhani satsang, he is downright indignant when it comes to offshoots of his own ministry, as evidenced by his long quote about the activities of John Roger Hinkins. Now, we had one man, maybe you knew about this up in Chicago when we were talking about it in the crowd there. This fellow takes every discourse we have, then he gets all the Eck books, and he gets himself initiated up to the second, and goes out and starts his own group, see? He had a meeting every night, and he would give them what they call aura balancing or adjusting. I thought this thing was awfully funny. I sent some people in to see him and hear him, and he was having kind of a séance every night. And he was saying, "Well, Brother Paul's here. Brother Paul's going to talk to us now." Then he was saying that I had lunch with him about twice a month, asking him if we could join organizations, see? And he was selling all of his work upon the inference in that 1968 seminar over there. There were two women who came up from Santa Barbara, and she says, "Oh, we're Eck students." And I says, "You are?" She says, "Yeah, we're studying under Roger Hinkins. See, this fellow who had taken all of this and stolen it from us, and this thing was building up because he was using us to build his organization." Turning now to MSIA provides us with a classic example of how new religions in America quickly evolve over time after disconnecting from their previous roots. Although John Roger does not like to elaborate on his previous associations with spiritual groups, he was born Mormon, we do know that he was a one-time member of Eckankar in the latter part of the 1960s. In fact, his name is listed as a satsang convener in Rosemead, California, in one official Eckankar publication from that time period. While his association with the group was quite brief, Eckankar's impact on John Roger's eventual ministry was dramatic, so dramatic, in fact, that Twitchell even threatened legal action against his former chela if he continued to appropriate from Eckankar publications. Twitchell recounts, "So I wrote him a letter and said, 'Stop now,' and he didn't pay much attention to that. Then I told the attorney, I says, 'Stop him.' The attorney wrote him a letter. He had this organization going down there in Miami and was based in San Gabriel, California, and I had the attorney fly down there and just walk in and talk to him." It may have been Eckankar's legal threats that prompted John Roger to sever his ties with the organization and start his own group, which he entitled MSIA, the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness. Before founding MSIA in the late 1960s, John Roger Hinkins, born Roger Delano Hinkins, he added the John with a hyphen later, on September 24, 1934, in Utah, held a number of jobs, ranging from a part-time switchboard operator for the Salt Lake City Police Department to working as an orderly for a psychiatric hospital. Eventually, John Roger secured his bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Utah in 1958, and 5 years later he obtained a job teaching English at Rosemead High School. It was during his stint at Rosemead that John Roger, affectionately known among his followers as J.R., experienced what he claims was a turning point in his spiritual evolution. According to John Roger, in 1963, he underwent a gallbladder operation that apparently led to a coma. The details are sketchy. After the coma, he says he emerged a new man, claiming to have been contacted by a higher being named the Beloved, or John, a Gnostic Christian figure. Coincidentally, within a few years of the operation, he was introduced to Eckankar, while also exploring other metaphysical teachings. His role as a spiritual teacher began when John Roger invited some of his high school students to his house to have spiritual seminars. Thus, John Roger's movement started while he was still in Eckankar. It is therefore not surprising to see the similarities between John Roger's group and Twitchell's. What is intriguing in all of this, of course, is to see how religions evolve from one group to another, that is, from Shiv Dayal Singh's vision in Agra, to Kirpal Singh's vision in Delhi, to Paul Twitchell's vision in San Diego, to John Roger's vision in Rosemead. While MSIA is more or less a revised version of Eckankar, with some esoteric Christianity added on to make it more Western, John Roger has distanced himself from Eckankar and instead purports that he is a continuation of the line of Sawan Singh of Radhasoami Beas. John Roger's disassociation from Eckankar seems to have begun when Twitchell threatened lawsuits against him. Nevertheless, John Roger draws directly from Eckankar for his inspiration, though modifying some key concepts, like the role of the guru, the meditation procedure, and the initiation structure, in order to distinguish MSIA, albeit slightly, from its original source, and to present the teachings as unique. The following is a comparison of several key concepts of Eckankar's with MSIA's. Sarmad/Sugmad. An interesting example of how John Roger borrowed ideas from Twitchell and modified them is found in his transformation of the Ek term Sugmad, which refers to God. Although John Roger at one time also used the term Sugmad to describe the ultimate, he later altered the term after reading a Radhasoami Beas publication, which described the life and work of an obscure Indian Jewish mystic named Sarmad. Taking his cue from a rather out-of-the-way Beas book entitled Sarmad, John Roger transposed Sugmad into Sarmad for his MSIA publications. For instance, when referring to the divine in his book Baraka, he writes, "The silent ones, who are spiritual forces issuing forth out of the Sarmad, the Lord of the positive realms of spirit, work directly in line with the energy of the traveler in the movement of spiritual inner awareness." Hence, what we find here is an Ekankar offshoot that tries to go farther back in history, even past its predecessor, to appropriate what is seen as more original material to transform and color its doctrines. MSIA is perhaps the first popular eclectic Shabd yoga-based group in America, in that it incorporates Shabd yoga ideas not only from Ekankar doctrines, but also from Radhasoami ones, such as Beas's five-name mantra, into its overall theological mix. The result is a fascinating, if confusing, potpourri of metaphysical ideas thoroughly laced with Indian terms. More terminology linkage. While John Roger replaces Ekankar's Sugmad term with Radhasoami's Sarmad, there are several instances when he directly incorporates Ekankar words into his theology. For example, in Baraka on page 14, he makes reference to the silent ones, which is in fact an Ek term defined in the Ekankar dictionary as agents of the Sugmad who are in command of the great sound current. Another example which reveals that MSIA is largely beholden to the writings of Ekankar is the adoption of the term Baraka. John Roger even titled one of his books after it. According to the Ekankar dictionary, it means, "May the blessings be." John Roger also uses this term throughout his writings, but he defines it a bit differently than Twitchell does. Baraka, he says, is the Holy Spirit, grace, seeing the light and hearing the sound. Additionally, the Ek word Tiwaja makes its way into John Roger's material, although he keeps the same definition as Twitchell does, namely, the gaze of the Master or God. John Roger changes the spelling of Tiwaja to Twaji. Why he does this, one can only speculate. Perhaps he is simply trying to further distinguish his path from Ekankar's, which he later accomplishes to some degree as he develops his own unique blend of Eastern and Western teachings. The God Worlds. An inherent aspect of Shabd Yoga philosophy is the belief in inner spiritual planes. The order of these regions is considered very important because the soul must know the right roadmap if it is to return to God successfully. The cosmologies of John Roger and Twitchell are similar, but the differences that John Roger implements, however slight, are considered radical departures from Twitchell's version. Whereas Twitchell delineates 12 realms, not including the etheric stage, each with their own distinct sounds, John Roger only recognizes 5, with the 5th having several subdivisions. In fact, John Roger's cosmology matches in terms of numbers Radhasoami Beas's 5-plane schema. But the sounds described in Radhasoami, 1. Bell, 2. Thunder, 3. Violin, 4. Flute, 5. Veena, clearly conflict with John Roger's. Thus, MSIA's picture of the spiritual realms seems to be a mix of Ekankar and Radhasoami, adopting from Ekankar a particular sequence of spiritual sounds, and adopting from Radhasoami the number of spiritual dimensions. Initiation. In Radhasoami Satsang Beas, initiation is usually conducted in one ceremony. Ekankar, on the other hand, has divided its initiation into 12 levels, corresponding with each inner plane. Whereas Radhasoami Satsang Beas gives 5 names for its meditation mantra, again corresponding with the names of the 5 inner lords of the respective inner regions, Ekankar allows its initiators to choose from a list of names which are not similar to Radhasoami's, but more closely mimicking Transcendental Meditation's list of mantras. John Roger Hinkins, though he was a member of Ekankar, decided to use the 5 names given at the Radhasoami Satsang Beas initiation. How John Roger learned of these names is unknown. However, according to the J.R. controversy, that John Roger has misplaced the order of the names is certain. For instance, in Radhasoami, the first name of the 5-name mantra corresponds to the Lord of the first region in Sahansdal Kanwal. John Roger also gives the same name for his new initiates. However, the names for the second and third region are juxtaposed by John Roger. Interestingly, it appears for years that John Roger was unaware of the mix-up, assuming as he did that he was giving the same 5-name mantra that Radhasoami gurus at Beas had been giving out. John Roger, though, does not give one initiation in MSIA like Radhasoami. Rather, like Twitchell, he gives an initiation for each of the inner planes. In MSIA's case, 5 initiations total. John Roger calls his last initiation the soul initiation. Clearly, he was influenced in spacing out his initiations by his association with Ekankar. However, the changes John Roger made to Twitchell's initiation procedure, like giving a universal mantra and limiting the amount of initiations, were apparently the result of his contact with Radhasoami publications. Mystical Traveler Consciousness. The central concept in Radhasoami is not Shabd, as one may expect, but rather it is the idea of a living master, a guru who is directly connected to the Supreme Lord. This concept, above all others, is the one that is most pivotal to Radhasoami theology. Ekankar, as we have pointed out, utilized this same idea when Twitchell coined the term living Ek Master. He also fleshed out the idea by adding the more nebulous concept of the Mahanta, the inner master who guides Ekists on their inner journey. John Roger took over Ekankar's concept, but again developed it in ways that are unique to his ministry. John Roger coined the term the Mystical Traveler Consciousness, or MTC for short. Most likely a transfiguration of Twitchell's spiritual traveler, which Twitchell got from Julian P. Johnson's With a Great Master in India. In MSIA's theology, the MTC represents the God power on earth. Followers of John Roger recognize him as the physical embodiment of the MTC. The previous holder of the MTC, we are told, was Sawan Singh of Radhasoami Satsang Beas. When discussing the role of an MTC, John Roger makes reference to this Radhasoami master. Those who have held the keys to the mystical traveler consciousness in the past have brought to mankind the message of love, harmony, balance, honesty, and integrity. Sometimes these spiritual messages have been given directly and openly, in a public way. Sometimes the mystical travelers live very quiet, ordinary lives. Some historical figures who have held the keys to the traveler consciousness are Rama, Elihu, Jesus the Christ, and Huzur Maharaj Baba Sawan Singh, who taught Sant Mat, or the teachings of the saints. However, John Roger's claim that Sawan Singh was the prior MTC before him was not his first claim. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, John Roger claimed that Rebazar Tars, the famous mentor of Ekankar, was the previous holder of the MTC. Why the switch? It could be that once John Roger broke with Ekankar, he learned more about how Ekankar was mostly derived from Radhasoami. Thus, once he realized that Rebazar Tars was probably a cover name used by Twitchell to hide his real inspirations, John Roger opted for Sawan Singh of Beas, since he was the guru of both Kirpal Singh and Charan Singh, the two most popular Shabd Yoga gurus living when John Roger started his ministry. By bypassing both Charan and Kirpal and going directly to Sawan Singh, John Roger attempted to legitimize his group in ways that Ekankar could not. Twitchell's Vairagi Masters was a ploy to buttress the lineage of Twitchell. By claiming that Sawan Singh was the previous MTC, was John Roger's way of adding luster and authenticity to his fledgling movement. As we see, John Roger has increasingly moved his group away from Ekankar. His eclectic approach has allowed him to make MSIA open to a wide variety of influences, including LifeSpring, Est, channeling, New Age thought, crystals, massage, theosophy, and Gnostic Christianity. Even though MSIA still retains a huge Ekankar influence, its evolving infrastructure allows it to grow in ways that one cannot predict, given its origins. This may well be prototypical of all Shabd Yoga-related movements in the West that retain the idea that a living guru is necessary for the purity of their teachings. The living guru is, in many ways, a very volatile proposition for any group which does not want to change. I say this because the charismatic leader has at his or her disposal what the typical CEO does not: the theological foundation to unilaterally alter teachings to suit his or her needs. Since the guru is equated with God, whatever he or she does can be condoned or justified, even actions which are contrary to previous masters. For a litany of examples, just look at the life and work of Baba Fakir Chand, Thakkar Singh, Paul Twitchell, Darwin Gross, Harold Klemp, or even John Roger. Each of them, in their own ways, have tailored their previous mentor's work to suit their particular needs. This can range from moral strictures to esoteric doctrines. Perhaps one of the most difficult requirements to fulfill in Radhasoami is the injunction to perform 2.5 hours of meditation daily. Twitchell may have realized that his Western audience would not be amiable to such long hours of meditation, and so shortened the period to 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening, most likely getting his cue for such short periods from the success of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's transcendental meditation. John Roger Hinkins, however, trying to bridge much of Ekankar with Radhasoami. Remember, he uses Beas's mantra, Beas's book Sarmad, and Beas's great master Sawan Singh, and joins 2 hours of spiritual exercises daily. Such a commitment of time to meditation, of course, demands a more serious student, one who is willing to sacrifice nearly 1/10 of the day to one's chosen path. It may indeed be this very requirement which has kept MSIA's numbers much lower than Ekankar, despite the fact that John Roger has had his name as co-author on several best-selling books and has had much wider exposure to the public. Furthermore, John Roger has also reversed the meditation advice given in Radhasoami. Whereas in Radhasoami, the meditator is supposed to repeat their 5-name mantra when they encounter any lights or beings inside, in MSIA the neophyte is required to withhold the names, lest the intruding spirit capture the would-be soul. Overall, the changes from Ekankar that John Roger implements, from Mahanta to mystical traveler consciousness, from 12 initiations to 5, from 40 minutes of daily meditation to 2 hours, and so forth, are significant ones. Such modifications separate his group enough from Ekankar to present a wholly new version of Shakti Yoga in America. Chapter 5. Virtual Gurus, Jerry Mulvin, Gary Olson, and Michael Turner. In subatomic physics, a cursory search of underlying particles only reveals those materials that have a semi-permanent basis. But looking further, physicists discovered that there are, in fact, other subatomic particles, coined virtual particles, which exist only for nanoseconds, and even then only under certain very hot conditions. To detect these virtual particles, scientists have developed ingenious experiments where they literally run two particles into each other at nearly the speed of light to see what debris is left over. The debris, of course, is the insides of the exploding particle, which unmasks its inherent constituents. It is these very constituents, short-lived as they are, which reveals something of the internal structure behind what makes up the atom's nucleus. In many ways, it is an ongoing process. Even if you discover what particles lie within the nucleus, the next question follows naturally. What makes them up? Thus, the particle physicist is an archaeologist of sorts, attempting to uncover what nature has so elegantly concealed from our naked eye for billions of years. The only catch is that to properly discern subatomic material demands tremendous amounts of energy, in some instances much more energy than is available on Earth. Hence, the researcher of rarer forms of material is circumscribed by the limitations of his or her instruments. In a small, analogous way, certain religions are like subatomic material. Today, most of the religions we discuss are those that are rather well established, like atomic material which has a more permanent basis. But underlying them, we may find nuggets of the infinitesimally small which, from the viewpoint of human history, exist for almost no measurable time. For instance, if one tries to imagine how many gurus, prophets, yogis, and visionaries there have been in human history, I would venture to guess that one would be hard-pressed to recount 10, much less 100. But surely there must have been millions of people who have believed that they had revelations of one sort or another. Where is their history? Most of it lies buried in the recesses of time, likely never to be unearthed. In many ways they are reminiscent of virtual particles, definable but difficult to discern. Unfortunately, we have a tendency to look derisively at religions that have not lasted several hundred years, and even then they can still be regarded in the mainstream as cultish. However, I would contend that many, to be sure not all, significantly contributed to the evolution of religion as we know it today, even to those religions which have been accepted as traditional or mainstream. Thus, it can be rightly argued that what passes as religion is merely the tip of a huge iceberg that has been forgotten or neglected. What we see are political successes which, in an almost Darwinian fashion, have succeeded merely because their offspring have survived long enough to reproduce more healthy offspring. All the other startups in religion that failed, for whatever reasons, are lost. And yet it may have been these very failures, at least in terms of numbers or reproductions, which helped their counterparts to succeed in the first place. The history of religion, I would argue, would benefit greatly by trying to capture the forgotten history of what I term virtual gurus. Similar to the virtual particles in an accelerator tunnel, virtual gurus are those religious leaders which have too small a following, or live for too short a period, or are overshadowed by larger prophets of the time to be fully noticed and recognized in history. Like the particle zoo in physics, where the names of so many exotic small bits of matter defies any clear classification, There was and is a zoo of gurus lost to scholars and lost to our common understanding. Looking at the world of Radhasoami offers us a portal into the sheer quantity of would-be messiahs. Already there have been over 100 masters claiming divine godship connected with the ministry of Shiv Dayal Singh in Agra. And even among these, only a handful have been successful in the sense that they will be listed in some history book for future scholars to ponder over. The majority of lesser-known masters in Radhasoami will no doubt be forgotten, or if one or two are remembered, it will be as footnotes for interested historians. In this section I will look at 3 relatively obscure gurus who have offshored from Ekankar. Although these gurus may in time become well known and transcend the admittedly arbitrary category of virtual, at this stage they exemplify how small religious groups develop and how such shoestring operations survive beneath the shadows of the much larger organizations from which they first sprang. By looking at these gurus and groups during their infancy allows us the rare opportunity of maybe understanding how and why such groups die out before their adolescence, much less adulthood, or conversely, how and why they live on and continue for centuries. In any case, these 3 virtual gurus, Jerry Malvin, Gary Olson, and Michael Turner, are merely specimens of a huge array of potential candidates that fills almost every nook and cranny of the religious universe. If taken as a whole, these virtual groups, which individually may seem insignificant, make up a large organism themselves. One has only to think of the New Age movement for a further example. In the New Age movement there are several integral parts like channeling, shamanism, and UFOlogy, but add these elements together, and one gets a noticeable religious network that strongly impacts the American religious scene. Jerry Melvin was a 6th initiate in Ekankar, and a well-regarded speaker in the group for many years. However, in the late 1970s, he developed some doubts about Ekankar and its organization. At the same time, he began to believe that he was divinely commissioned to work as a master, as Melvin writes in his first book, The Annals of Time. In November 1979, I received physical verification of mastership, my final initiation that had already taken place in the formless worlds. At long last, a meeting on the physical plane with my guardian angel. There he sat, in plain view, Fubiquance. His eyes gleamed like mirrors and reflected me. My only thoughts were, I'm looking into the eyes of the Master. From that moment on, the great ones, Fubiquance and Rebazar Tars, have been the guiding force behind me. I immediately began straightening out any loose ends in my universe. All teachers, both on the physical plane and the inner planes, that I have been associated with in this lifetime, have been extremely important in my unfoldment. I hold them in the highest regard. Later in the same book, Melvin describes what it means to become a master. The God Force is an integral part of all the Master's vehicles, or bodies. With the guidance of the Great Ones and Sat Nam, the God Force had established itself in me. It is the responsibility of each seeker to truth to find out for themselves who the Master is behind the radiant form. My purpose is to keep and perpetuate the original teaching that I have been given over these many lifetimes. It is called the Divine Science of Light and Sound. Jerry Melvin's claim to mastership caused some controversy in Ekankar, as evidenced by Bernadine Berlin's thinly veiled reference to Melvin and his activities in her officially sanctioned Ek book entitled My Ek Master Affair. Berlin writes, in Paul Twitchell's time, a former second initiate left the path of Eckankar, started his own religious teachings using some of Paul's copyrighted materials. Editor's note, that would be John Roger Hinkins. A former sixth initiate, editor's note, Jerry Mulvin, has done the same thing during Darwin's time as living Ek master. For them to misuse the Ek power that had been given to them with each initiation is suicidal. It will not work against itself, but will turn back upon the one misusing it. Darwin stated that he feels sorry for those they mislead, for they become responsible for their followers' spiritual growth and are only able to take them to the astral plane. Mulvin, unlike Twitchell, who attempted to deny his genealogical connections, admits that he was a member of Eckankar and that it was instrumental in his life, but he tends to downplay its significance in his current role as master. Explains Mulvin, "You could say that Eckankar was instrumental. Their ethics prompted my leaving the teaching. It didn't take long for Eckankar to turn into the very thing it said it wasn't, a religion. Eckankar is not responsible for my present spiritual state of being. That was accomplished through my own out-of-body journeys in this lifetime and many others. The Divine Science of Light and Sound was founded on February 2nd, 1982. Its mission is to present the original teachings from the soul realm to those souls that are ready to go back home there, and the method of return via out-of-body explorations." Mulvin's break with Eckankar coincided with two controversial events that took place in the group. The publication of SPC's journal Eckankar, A Hard Look at a New Religion, which alleged that Eckankar's founder extensively plagiarized and covered up certain biographical details of his life, and the transference of Rod of Power from Darwin Gross to Harold Klemp. Mulvin's ministry did not start until several months after this unexpected transition took place. Even though Mulvin's teachings are clearly drawn from his experiences in Eckankar, he dedicated his first book to Fubi Quants and Rebazar Tars, figures first written about by Paul Twitchell in several of his official Ek books. He has dramatically streamlined his teachings, doing away with much of Eckankar's elaborate superstructure. As Mulvin points out, there are no initiates or initiations in this divine science. Rather, for a yearly fee of $100, which he claims is tax-deductible, Mulvin offers three basic components. 1. The monthly home study discourses. 2. Inner guidance and protection through the inner realms. And 3. The connection. Originally, Mulvin started his operation in Manhattan Beach, California, but eventually he moved it to Scottsdale, Arizona. Although exact membership figures are not given by Mulvin, it is believed that his following is in the low hundreds. He has published several books and has even attended several psychic fairs to sell his path. Mulvin's terminology almost exactly parallels Eckankar's, except that he incorporates some Radhasoami and Ruhani satsang interpretations which slightly distinguish his ideas. Although he does not use Eckankar's term Vairagi masters, which is trademarked, he nevertheless refers to a tradition of great ones, which includes many of the names given in Ek's pantheon of living masters who descended from Gakko some 6 million years ago. Mulvin has not attracted any noticeable publicity, and his activities are mostly unknown among most Shabd yoga practitioners in Radhasoami or Eckankar-related groups. However, he has been serving as a spiritual teacher for over 13 years, a long tenure in today's spiritual marketplace. Mulvin also may have been an inspiration for other Eckists to break off and start their own ministries. To be sure, there is no causal correlation between Mulvin's break with Eckankar and several others who have followed suit to pursue their own claims of mastership. But since he was a highly placed initiate in Ekankar for many years, his example cannot be ignored or downplayed. I would argue that gurus like Malvin, even if their followings remain small and relatively invisible to the mainstream media, serve as bridges from one movement to another. One only has to look at Shiv Dayal Singh's popularity today to realize that a once obscure guru can emerge after decades to be recognized and acclaimed by millions. And where did Shiv Dayal Singh get his inspiration? From Tulsi Sahib of Hathras. But who has heard of him? Not many, but that is precisely my point. It may well be that Malvins and gurus like him are players in a potential spiritual lottery, where one or more winners will find a niche among religious seekers, only to emerge from obscurity into the limelight of unheard-of popularity. Far-fetched? Unlikely? Well, Jesus Christ only had 12 apostles, and they were not an organized group to start with. Cliché-ridden as it may sound, the advertisement for the California lottery holds a very valuable truth which is applicable to virtual gurus. You can't win unless you play. Arguably, the same holds true for competing gurus. Unless you are a candidate, regardless of your credentials, regardless of the odds against you, and regardless of your varied competition, willing to go head-to-head with other proclaimed masters, you cannot be considered a potential winner. That Malvin and others have literally placed their claims to public scrutiny at least ensures them the opportunity that seekers will inspect their wares. It may be that very few will buy their offerings, but at least they have opened shop in the booming religious gallery. Although it may sound trite or inappropriate to cite Woody Allen's famous aphorism to explain guru politics, it does have a ring of truth to it when applied to the lottery of competing masters. 90% of life is just showing up. In our example, given the unexpected contingencies of the buying public, it is surely a significant percentage of the game. In other words, if you or someone in your behalf don't make the claim, you won't have any chance to secure a public following. Gary Olson. Following in the footsteps of Jerry Malvin, Gary Olson, also a former Ekist, founded Masterpath in the mid-1980s. Claiming the title of Shri, an honorific prefix which all three Ekankar masters have used for themselves, it is derived from Hindi and simply means sir, or respected one. Olson states that he is in a long line of Satgurus who have been appointed to act as vehicles for God to bring souls back home to the highest abode. Unlike Malvin, whose terminology is closely linked with Ekankar, Olson has taken a more traditional Shapt yoga approach, basing much of his terminology on Radhasoami and Sant Mat. Though he also invokes Ekankar's unique definition of terms at places, his teachings lack the amalgamation of Scientology and Theosophy, which Twitchell intertwined with Shapt yoga. Olson's Masterpath is an attempt to present Ekankar's version of Shapt yoga without the admixture of other non-related New Age thought. In doing so, the Masterpath appears to be a fusing of Ekankar with more traditional Indian versions of Shapt yoga. Olson's following statement reveals this fusion. The first central reality of the Masterpath is soul transport. Every individual has the opportunity to explore the divine regions of light and sound on his own volition. After having the secrets imparted by a living master, and then discovering and identifying with the soul essence, the inner door opens, and we experience soul transport firsthand. The second central reality is the audible life stream, the mighty stream that issues out of the Godhead. All creation came into being upon this sound current, and it is on this gigantic river that all subsequent creation is sustained. But on almost all key features, Olson's teachings parallel Ekankar's. The The following are 5 areas in which Olson's master path is similar to Paul Twitchel's Eckankar. Dreams as an avenue for spiritual unfoldment. Unlike Radhasoami, which disdains dreams as mostly projections of the lower mind, Eckankar advocates dreaming as a royal road to spiritual progress. Gary Olson also agrees with his mentor Paul Twitchell on this issue and advocates dreams as a viable means for inner progress. Writes Olson, "If there is anything you do not completely understand or believe, please ask for assistance from the inner master. During the dream state and in contemplation, the master will help you understand the greater mysteries." For many, the claim that spiritual experiences can occur in the dream state may be an attractive one. Since dreams are part of one's daily life, the opportunities for religious visions are vast. A feeling of comfort and security may arise, believing that the Master is regularly manifesting. Thus, disciples of Eckankar and Master Path receive an almost immediate boost when they begin on the path, unlike those in Radhasoami, who may spend years meditating before any kind of spiritual state is believed to be reached. The God Worlds. Olson's Planes chart, given in his booklet Master Path, 1993, reveals a significant influence from Paul Twitchell's God Worlds chart, which Twitchell copyrighted in his book The Spiritual Notebook. While Olson utilizes Eckankar's official version, he also draws from some Radhasoami terminology here, particularly the names of the various presiding rulers and the names of the highest regions. A more detailed cosmology is offered by Olson in an early work, Master Path Book 2, 1988, which is almost a near match with the Radhasoami cosmology found in Daryai Lal Kapoor's Call of the Great Master, 1964. Both authors describe 12 states of consciousness, the first 6 being the classic Indian chakras, and later 6 being beyond the third eye. In his cosmological chart, Olson not only refers to the same deities found in Radhasoami literature, but he also mentions the same signposts, like the Crooked Tunnel, intended to direct the soul back to Sachkhand, the highest spiritual region. In fact, Olson is so indebted to Radhasoami that his chart appears to have been a photocopy of Kapoor's, which he then slightly altered. Hence, Olson is clearly relying on both Eckankar and Radhasoami for his sources of inspiration. The Sacred Writings. Gary Olson has been highly influenced in his teachings by the writings of the Radhasoami Satsang Beas masters, particularly Sawan Singh, Jagat Singh, and Charan Singh. However, Olson has, like his predecessors before him, particularly Paul Twitchell, attempted to veil his indebtedness to Radhasoami. For instance, in his private discourses, which are only available to paying members of Master Path, Olson has appropriated large sections from Beas publications without citing or referencing where he got the material. Instead, Olson implies that he is the sole author of the discourses, even though there are hundreds of sentences and direct quotes from Charan Singh's Words Eternal, Jagat Singh's Science of the Soul, and Sawan Singh's Dawn of Light. In these private discourses, Olson even prints a warning that they are meant for members only, and he includes a copyright page which states, "All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form by an electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording means, or otherwise, without written permission of the copyright holder." Such stark warnings to his would-be readers is consistent with Eckankar's and MSIA's policy of not letting outsiders read or copy what is considered esoteric or secret material meant only for initiates. Another reason, of course, may be that Olson does not want to face accusations of plagiarism from other Shakti Yoga groups like Beas, which have been the source of much of his esoteric material. Indeed, when Olson learned of a defection within his group, he asked his secretary to contact the disciple in order to get the members-only discourses back. The secretary even went so far as to offer payment to get Olson's discourses back. Due to increasing pressure from both within and outside of his group, Olson has reluctantly admitted on taped discourses to plagiarizing less than 15% of his material, a startling admission for any fledgling God-man to make. There are numerous examples illustrating Olson's unquestionable indebtedness to Radhasoami literature. His inspiration in this case was Charan Singh's Words Eternal. Example 1. Radhasoami, the very reason we are placed on this earth is to enable us to realize God within ourselves. Master Path, the very reason we are placed on this earth is to enable us to realize God within ourselves. Example 2. Radhasoami, there is nothing in this world that is worthy of our effort and achievement except the wealth of Nam, the jewel of Shabd. Master Path, there is nothing in this world that is worthy of our efforts and achievements except the jewel of soul. Example 3. Radhasoami, the real form of the perfect master is the word of Shabd. It assumes the human form in order to be able to communicate with man and to show him the way back to his home. Master Path, the real form of the perfect master is the word of Shabd. It assumes the human form to communicate with man and to point the way back home. Example 4. Radhasoami, the first and most important thing for an initiate to realize is the great value of human life and its true purpose. The human body is a priceless gift bestowed on man through the Lord's grace. The purpose of this rare gift is to afford us an opportunity to return to our true home. Master Path, the first and most important thing for an initiate to realize is the great value of human life and its true purpose. The human body is a priceless gift, for only through this vehicle can we attain godhood. No other life form has this opportunity. Example 5. Radhasoami, we are to do everything according to the best of our knowledge, but the results are to be left entirely in the hands of God. The Lord loves to meet us even more than we can possibly long to meet him. It is he who creates the desire in our hearts to meet him. Master Path, we are to do everything according to the best of our knowledge, but the results are to be left entirely in the hands of the Master. The inner Master desires to meet us more than we desire to meet him. He creates the desire in us to find him in the first place. Example 6. Radhasoami, blessed are those whose hearts the Lord has kindled the flame of his own love. Master Path, blessed are those in whose hearts the Master has kindled the flame of his own love. Example 7. Radhasoami, it is only a question of time. The battle with the mind has to be won. Many blows will be given and many received, but with the Master and the Lord on our side, victory is assured. Master Path, it is only a question of time. The battle with the mind has to be won. Many blows will be given and many received, but with the Master on your side, victory is assured. Example 8. Radhasoami, God is your Father, and you are his child. Try to approach him in that light. Master Path, God is your Father, and you are his child. Try to approach him in this light. Example 9. Radhasoami, it is not for us to judge the progress. Ours is to do duty faithfully and leave the rest to the Master. Master Path, it is not for you to judge your progress, simply to do your duty and leave the rest to the Master. Example 10. Radhasoami. The doctrine of karma is not against making any effort, but teaches us to be content when our efforts fail. Masterpath. The doctrine of karma is not against making any effort, but teaches us to be content when our efforts seemingly fail. Example 11. Radhasoami. It is true that slow and steady wins the race. How many times do we stumble and fall when we are learning how to walk? But as we grow older, we forget the struggles and enjoy the performance. So it is with spiritual work. Masterpath. It is true that slow and steady wins the race. How many times do we stumble and fall when we are learning how to walk? But as we grow older, we forget the struggles and enjoy the performance. So it is with spiritual unfoldment. Example 12. Radhasoami. Ups and downs come into the life of everyone in this world, but a satsangi who always has the protecting hand of the Master to guide him should never lose heart under any circumstances. Masterpath. Ups and downs do come into the life of everyone in this world, but a chela who always has the protecting hand of the Master to guide him should never lose heart under any circumstances. Example 13. Radhasoami. One should follow a career or profession to make one's living, but should not become engrossed in it to the detriment of one's spiritual attainment. Masterpath. One should follow a career or profession to make one's own living, but should not become engrossed in it to the detriment of one's own spiritual attainment. Example 14. Radhasoami. You can say, I am doing the meditation, providing you are doing it, but when you really do it, then you won't say, I am doing it. I only comes when we don't do it. When we truly meditate, the I just disappears. Masterpath. You can say, I am doing the contemplation, providing you are doing it, but when you really do it, then you won't say, I am doing it. I only comes when we don't do it. When we truly contemplate, then the I just disappears. Example 15. Radhasoami. Please don't worry about any person's leaving the Master. The Master will never leave any of his disciples. Masterpath. Please don't worry if any person leaves the Master, for the Master never leaves him. Example 16. Radhasoami. The constant feeling of loneliness and missing something is in reality the hidden unquenched thirst and craving of the soul for its Lord. It will always persist as long as the soul does not return to its ancient original home and meet its Lord. This feeling has been purposely put in the heart of man. Masterpath. The constant feeling of loneliness and missing something is in reality the hidden, unquenched thirst and craving of the soul for its Master. As long as the soul does not return to its original home, this feeling will purposefully persist in the hearts of man. Example 17. Radhasoami. The Master is not very far. He is within you, and if you go in, you will be able to contact him. Masterpath. The Master is not far from you. He is within you, and if you go in, you will be able to contact him. Example 18. Radhasoami. To lose our own identity and to become another being is love. Who are the true devotees of the Lord? Not those who know the most, but those who love the most. Masterpath. To lose our own identity and to become another being is love. Who are the true devotees of the Master? Not those who know the most, but those who love the most. And example 19. Radhasoami. Without divine grace, Satguru cannot be contacted. Without Satguru Nam cannot be obtained.
Without Nam there can be no salvation. Such is the essence of the path of the Masters. In this world we accept a reflection for real, a counterfeit for genuine, a piece of glass for a diamond. Master Path. Without divine grace, the Satguru cannot be contacted. Without the Satguru, Shabta cannot be obtained. Without Shabta, there can be no liberation. Such is the essence of the Master Path. In this world, we accept a reflection for real, a counterfeit for genuine, and a piece of glass for a diamond. A larger question naturally arises. Why do American gurus like Olson, Twitchell, Thind, and Rogers utilize Sant-Mat publications without acknowledging their sources, or properly referencing them? According to Paul Johnson, author of Initiates of Theosophical Masters, published by the State University of New York, 1995, it is not a new phenomenon, but one which has a long-standing tradition in America, dating back to Madame Blavatsky and her claim that there was a brotherhood of great masters living in the deeper recesses of the Himalayan mountains who were guiding her path and those of others in theosophy. What Blavatsky, Twitchell, Thind, and Olson are trying to do is genealogically dissociate their roots. As Johnson writes, the nature of the evidence makes it impossible to determine the truth about Gurdjieff's sources. He, like HPB and the Baha'i leaders, exemplifies a pattern of genealogical dissociation. This term, coined by David C. Lane, is illustrated in his study of the roots of the Ekankar movement. It describes the practice of concealing the real origins of an emergent spiritual tradition and supplanting the truth with more appealing mythological genealogies. Olson's reticence in identifying many of the sources of his written material is reflective of genealogical distancing, just like his predecessor Twitchell had done with his books. The overriding concern that Twitchell had with Ekankar, and which Olson has with Master Path, is the establishment of a new lineage, a new mythology, in some an autonomous tradition divorced from Radhasoami or any other previous parampara. The problem is that Twitchell's and Olson's struggle to divorce themselves from Radhasoami is impossible to achieve. Why? Because both grounded their respective teachings, both in written and in oral form, directly from Radhasoami. For Ekankar and Master Path to completely cut asunder their ties with Radhasoami would necessitate a wholesale transformation of their tenets, a transformation that both have been unwilling to do. The Who sound meditation technique. One of the more popular spiritual exercises given by Paul Twitchell in Ekankar's extensive literature is the Who chant, spelled H-U, practiced both privately and publicly, both audibly and silently. All Ekists chant Who as one of the cardinal spiritual exercises. Olson also advocates the technique in his path. He reveals, the Who is a word that is a part of every sound in the universe, whether it is the physical world or the worlds beyond. If you listen closely, usually at the end, you will hear the Who sound. In using this Who, you are saying respect to the divine creation, its power and its love, and therefore you become peaceful and tranquil. There are a couple of other obvious parallels in the meditation procedures of Twitchell and Olson. First of all, as mentioned previously, Ekankar advocates doing spiritual exercises in 20-minute intervals, twice daily if possible. And Olson also advises the same exact time period. As Olson puts it, 20 minutes at one sitting is plenty for the novice. Moreover, both Twitchell and Olson encourage the disciple during meditation to contemplate on the picture of the Guru. In Gary Olson's booklet Master Path, his picture is included on the back page for this activity. This is a practice which is not allowed by Radhasoami Satsang Beas-related groups. Instructional services. Ekankar has charged money for membership since its inception. Usually being a member in Ekankar meant that the Chela, as disciples are sometimes called, would receive a monthly discourse and a general letter from the master. Olson also follows the same format, though changing the titles of his services, he explains. When you feel certain that you want to start the discourses and become a student of the master, then send a letter stating that. The monthly mailings cost $25 a month, which includes a discourse, a contemplation note, and the ever-present guidance and protection of the inner master. This is a non-profit entity, and the majority of its substance and form exists on the inner planes, between master and seeker. According to Olson, each member receives the protection of the inner master. Like Ekankar, and dissimilar to Radhasoami, Olson makes a clear distinction between the inner and outer master, pointing out that the outer form is limited, while the inner form is unlimited. Comments Olson, I am limited in my outer form just like you are, but my inner form knows no boundaries and is actually the true master. As we have seen, Olson has gone back to Ekankar's roots, but apparently he has done away with much of Ekankar's Scientologistic influences, preferring a more straightforward Shabd Yoga presentation much like Malvin. In many ways, Gary Olson and those like him represent a new breed of American Shabd Yoga masters who have incorporated more traditional Shabd Yoga teachings into their group. While MSIA is the most successful to date of all the Ekankar offshoots, Gary Olson's Master Path is running a distant second. His popularity is growing steadily, with a following reportedly larger than Jerry Malvin's, but not drastically. The numbers range in the hundreds to very low thousands. With his streamlined approach, planned tours, and publications which present him as an enlightened being, Olson's Master Path is positioned to emerge as one of Ekankar's survivors into the 21st century. Michael Turner. Jerry Malvin broke off from Ekankar before Sri Darwin Gross, the second living Ekmaster, was excommunicated by his successor, Sri Harold Klemp, in 1983. When this ugly chapter occurred in Ekankar, it took many Ekists by surprise. How is it that a former living Ekmaster can become a person non grata, stripped of his initiations and banned from Ekankar activities? A number of Ekists reacted by leaving the group entirely. Still others chose to follow Gross and his newly founded group, Ancient Teachings of the Masters, or ATOM for short. Michael Turner, who had been a Chela of Ekankar since the mid-1970s, eventually aligned himself with Darwin Gross's work, even serving as a facilitator for him in his ministry. However, in 1993, Turner started his own movement, which he entitled The Sonic Spectrum. As Turner explains, since 1984, Sri Darwin Gross has taught a small coterie of Chelas, probably less than 10,000 worldwide. Editor's note, the number is actually much lower, closer to several hundred, as their living Shabd Sat Guru. While I was indeed a Chela of Sri Darwin's for many years, we severed all legal and contractual connections when I attained God realization and began teaching in late October 1993. This severance was a mutually agreed-upon decision which I initiated prior to my acceptance of mastership. Unlike Twitchell, Gross, Klemp, Malvin, and even Olson, he is much more open about connecting his mission with the work of Radhasoami gurus in India, whereas the other Ekankar-related gurus have tried to shy away from their Indian roots and any parallels between themselves and their Radhasoami counterparts. Turner has tried to strengthen those apparent ties in his writings. Elaborates Turner, I also have a strong affinity with my Radhasoami and Ruhani Satsang brethren in the East. I have been particularly inspired and inwardly guided by Shiv Dayal Singh, Sawan Singh, and Kirpal Singh. Turner's research into the history of Ekankar has led him in a direction which is opposite of Twitchell's. While Twitchell and others who followed him tried to cover up his past associations, Turner has been extremely forthcoming about the specific influences in his life, detailing not only his personal associations with Gross and Klemp, but also providing details about his reading and music habits, as well as fleshing out his personal preferences in his daily life. Among the literary influences in his life, Turner mentions Guru Nanak, Darshan Singh, Kabir, Richard Bach, Paul Brunton, Ram Dass, Abbie Hoffman, Jack Kerouac, Timothy Leary, and Tom Wolfe, and many others. Since Michael Turner is a practicing musician, he earns his livelihood as a word processor for a hotel in Tucson. He also explains how music has played a significant role in his life. He is particularly fond of the Grateful Dead, and believes that they sometimes act as conduits for the Shabd. Other musicians he likes include the Beatles, David Crosby, The Doors, Peter Gabriel, Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, Joni Mitchell, Moody Blues, and Neil Young, to cite a few from his litany. Turner even provides a list of his favorite foods: pasta and grape nuts, sports, football, television shows, Seinfeld and The Simpsons, and movies, Casablanca, Star Wars trilogy. Turner, who was born in 1958 in Tucson, Arizona, his current place of residence, candidly reveals even more details of his life, like that he was married for 7 years to Mary E. Dalgleish, but divorced in 1990, that while he has held a number of jobs, he has worked primarily as a word processor and secretary, and that he received his bachelor's degree in English and journalism from Sonoma State in 1981. That a fledgling guru is so open about the biographical details of his life contrasts starkly with his guru counterparts, who have been anything but forthcoming. It also suggests that Turner has read about what has continued to damage much of Ekankar's success, since Ekankar's founder was extremely disingenuous about his life, covering up details by creating fictional characters and scenarios, a fact which has led to severe criticism of him, both within and outside the movement. Turner has instead created a sense of openness about his ministry, where any or all questions are allowed to be asked. Turner represents a postmodern breed of gurus, ones who are willing to engage the public about almost every detail of their private lives. To be sure, Turner and others like him are part of the spirit of the age, where even the President of the United States' life has been subject to extreme public scrutiny. That Turner has volunteered a tremendous amount of information about his life bodes well for his ministry, especially at a time when almost all gurus and cults are suspect. Overall, Turner's teachings are much more eclectic than Mulvan's or Olson's, while both Mulvan and Olson stay close to Ekankar, though at times attempting to purify the teachings. Turner literally relishes in making connections with other Shabd yoga gurus. In his monthly publication, The Sonic Spectrum, Turner cites widely varying sources for his ideas, ranging from the Qinghai to Charan Singh to the Grateful Dead, all in one page. The result is an unusual mix of pop culture, esoteric Indian terms, and New Age philosophy. It is a combination, no doubt, that reflects Turner's varying tastes. His willingness to quote and cite such diverging figures allows one to follow the evolution of his ideas fairly easily. While Turner's group does offer a path which is similar in structure to Ekankar, there are also noticeable differences. For instance, instead of charging a monthly fee or yearly fee like Ekankar and the offshoots that we have mentioned so far, Turner only charges for subscribing to his newsletter, attending his periodic seminars, and receiving his literature and tapes. And his prices are quite low when compared with his competitors. Turner's following, however, is extremely small, perhaps not more than 10 people. But since his ministry has only been around for less than 2 years, this does not mean that his group does not have great potential for growth. In fact, Turner is the first Western Shabd yoga guru to make wide use of the growing Internet. His chief disciple, Harry Kite, has even started a news group entitled alt.meditation.shabta, devoted to the ecumenical approach of his guru Michael Turner. This market is still not fully understood, but its potential is vast. Turner may not have a core following as of yet, but his name recognizability has increased 100-fold by his numerous postings on the Internet. He has also received his fair share of criticism, or flames, as they are vernacularly termed on the net. In his postings on alt.religion.ekankar, Turner has been subjected to extreme ridicule, ranging from simple name-calling, several Ekists call him Baba Turnip, to vicious personal attacks, some labeling him an opportunist and a downright fraud. Turner has responded to all of this with equanimity, which has garnered a few outside admirers who have come to his defense in the endless flame wars on the net. Since Turner has tapped into the net, he has done what his counterparts have not, tailored his message to a completely new medium. In the new age of light-speed information, Turner is the first to turn the corner, and it may well establish him and his ministry in a field untapped by most gurus selling their wares. In many ways, Turner can be seen as the natural extension of Twitchell's attempt to westernize Shabd yoga. While Radhasoami has very strict guidelines for those seeking initiation, for instance, the present Beas master Gurinder Singh requires interested seekers to follow the 3 moral vows: vegetarianism, sexual abstinence outside of marriage, and no drugs or alcohol for at least 1 year before applying. Ekankar has reduced the prerequisites to a minimum, doing away with vegetarianism and sexual abstinence. Michael Turner has gone even further than Ekankar, asking for nothing except a serious interest in the subject. His approach, of course, is quite American, where conformity to set guidelines and rules has always been viewed with suspicion. Concerning membership to his group, Turner states, "I reckon there are a couple of dozen people currently receiving the sonic spectrum. My teaching is a baby seedling, just starting to sprout above the ground. There are no requirements to join one of my study groups, save a real interest in the subject. Those requesting initiation should be willing to put at least 30 minutes a day into Shabd meditation on a consistent basis. There is no grading system in this path, and no series of hierarchical initiations. Those who are devoted to their spiritual unfoldment will be given a single initiation which connects them to the Shabd, and be allowed to blossom on their own pace. In that vein, I do not have any stipulations regarding diet, use of intoxicants, or sexual orientations or activity." Thus, the sonic spectrum's lack of requirements allows its teachings a flexibility not seen in other Shabd yoga groups. It also allows for the following to be much less committed, which may be why Turner has yet to develop a core constituency. Although strict prerequisites may turn away potential seekers at first, when followed by members, it ensures a dedication to the movement which is often missing in groups that lack such indices. Turner's approach may be more ideally suited, however, to a spiritual market wary of authoritarian figures and absolutist claims. Indeed, Turner may be the first postmodern offshoot in Eckankar's short history. Though he does retain much of the ideology of Radhasoami and Eckankar, he has deconstructed much of the superstructure surrounding the teachings. In a way, he has stripped away the moral and cultural edifice surrounding Radhasoami and Eckankar, and has concentrated on the spiritual teachings and techniques. Of course, to longtime practitioners of Shapt Yoga, Turner's approach is too one-sided, since the moral edifice is the foundation upon which Guru Bhakti and Shapt Bhakti functions. Clearly, all three gurus, Malvin, Olson, and Turner, represent different stages in the development of religion. At one end of the spectrum is Gary Olson, who is perhaps at this leg the most successful and who represents a slight modification of Eckankar. Then there is Jerry Malvin, who has streamlined Eckankar to suit his own vision of the Great Ones, while adding a creativity of his own. And finally, at the other end of the spectrum is Michael Turner, who has brought Eckankar back to its roots, while at the same time doing away with many of the requirements that prevented some people from joining. Which group, if any, will be successful in the spiritual marketplace in North America may be difficult to predict at this stage. Certainly it will depend upon the group's ability to adapt Shapt Yoga teachings to an American audience. Altogether, these virtual gurus and others like them partially contribute to the plurality of religion in North America and are in some ways the grassroots of Shaptism here. Conclusion. The future of Radhasoami. As we have seen, Radhasoami has gone through several stages in its history. It started in relative obscurity in Agra, India, in the mid-19th century with a very small constituency. Radhasoami's progress in India and abroad, however, has been remarkable. From just a couple hundred followers in the 1860s to several thousands in the late 1890s, to 100,000 in the 1930s to over 10 million in the 1990s. This exponential growth is clearly visible when observing gurus like Rajinder Singh, who has already initiated in 6 years more disciples than his father Darshan Singh did in 15 years, and what his grandfather Kirpal Singh accomplished in 25 years. Gurinder Singh's following has also significantly grown, with close to 100,000 disciples initiated each year, and still more seekers waiting in line. Certainly not all religions witness such rapid growth as Radhasoami has. How it emerged as a transnational religion with each success is due to several major factors. Prominent among them are an early splintering of the movement which spread its teachings far and wide, as far north as the Punjab shortly after the founder's death. A proliferation of new publications, most of which were in Hindi and English, which allowed the teachings to be readily available to a larger audience, and the implementation of an initiation procedure known as initiation by proxy, which made entry into the group very accessible. To understand the progress of Radhasoami in North America, other factors, some political, must be considered, like the revocation of the immigration laws which allowed for Indian initiates and gurus to come to America, and, of course, the advancement of technology which made communication with and travel to America easier. While Radhasoami started in North America in the 1910s with only a handful of disciples, today there are over 50,000 initiates. Add to these increasing numbers the popularity of Americanized versions of Shapt Yoga through the aegis of Eckankar, MSIA, Thin's Sikh study group, the Divine Science of Light and Sound, the Sonic Spectrum, Master Path, Ching Hai's movement, and a host of other emerging groups, and it is easy to see that Radhasoami-related ideas are blanketing the American religious scene. Overall, Radhaswami's greatest impact on the American spiritual marketplace has been in contributing to this plethora of new religious movements. When these groups are taken into consideration, like Eckankar and MSIA, the numbers swell into the low 100,000s, a truly remarkable number when one stops to reflect that there were literally no American followers of Radhaswami before 1911. In many ways, Radhaswami's history illustrates the evolution of religion, how religions may start as a single small seed, but grow and multiply into numerous significant organisms, which in turn may themselves serve as catalysts for more offshoots. As for the future of Radhaswami in North America, I would argue that it looks exceptionally bright for a number of reasons. First of all, the most popular Radhaswami group in the world, the Satsang at Beas, has bought property in the United States for the first time. The plan is to build a large meeting hall so that the present master, Gurinder Singh, can visit North Carolina and eventually other centers on the East and West Coasts on a regular basis. Gurinder Singh's last trip in 1994 saw more than 4,000 people attend one of his satsangs in Palm Springs, California. Given those numbers as a base, it is only a matter of time when the Beas guru will be attracting over 10,000 people to his talks, a number which would have surely shocked Beas satsangis back in the 1940s. Perhaps other Indian Radhaswami gurus will follow Gurinder Singh's example and buy property in North America, which may result in more visits by gurus and hence more exposure of Radhaswami to Americans. It also may give Radhaswami more of a permanent position on American soil. Secondly, in the 21st century, the one technology that has the most potential to gather in new seekers to Radhaswami and its affiliates is the Internet. The Internet allows for marketing and advertising for little or no money. What this does, in effect, is allow small organizations to have access to thousands, if not millions, of potential clientele. Already, as we have mentioned, Sri Michael Turner, a Tucson guru with barely 10 disciples, has accessed the Internet and has posted his ideas on alt.religion.ekankar, alt.meditation, and his own newly formed news group alt.meditation.shabda. Just by being on the net, Turner has emerged as a significant voice in alternative religion. The net will also allow other fledgling gurus to advertise their ministries, although it is not possible to make any exact predictions about who will be the winners in this new medium. One thing seems certain. The proliferation of Shapt Yoga gurus, which started in Agra, India back in 1878, will most likely explode in the 21st century. Moreover, Radhaswami may witness further growth if gurus spread their doctrines to audiences which have not yet been exposed to Radhaswami teachings. In other words, if they are able to tap into a new market. Ching Hai serves as an example here. By bringing Radhaswami to a Vietnamese audience both within North America and abroad, she has accessed a previously uncharted market. Ching Hai's success is obvious. Her membership numbers are now close to 100,000, and her Los Angeles satsangs attract thousands. Following this argument, if Radhaswami eventually spreads to areas like Mexico and Russia, which have had very little exposure to it in the past, we should expect Radhaswami numbers to increase even more. On the same front, since homosexuality is considered morally unacceptable according to Radhaswami doctrine, Radhaswami is closed off to a significant potential audience. In addition, prohibitions against alcohol and any form of drugs, premarital sex, or meat-eating may turn many Americans away from Radhaswami. If in the future, however, Radhaswami lessens its stringent moral standards, which includes accepting homosexuality as an alternative lifestyle, It will certainly appeal to a much larger number of Americans. However, if Radhaswami branches like Beas and Rouhani Satsang maintain their conservative position, other Shapt yoga groups, such as Ekankar and MSIA, which do not have strict ethical guidelines, may see an increase in their membership, since they will attract those who cannot or choose not to follow Radhaswami's prerequisites. Already people like Gary Olson and Jerry Malvin have taken advantage of this by stressing that their followers get to retain their personal freedom while engaged on the spiritual path. Yet, since Olson, Malvin, and others not directly connected with Radhaswami charge money for their services, they may have limits to their audiences, especially if the seeker can get the teachings for free somewhere else. While it is difficult to make foolproof predictions concerning the future of Radhaswami, there are a few probable outcomes. To begin with, it would appear that three types of Shapt yoga gurus will emerge. 1. Those who are traditional and related to a long-standing lineage, and who will buttress their claims by being conservative and orthodox in relation to Radhaswami's moral code and ideology. Gurinder Singh of Beas and Teja Singh of Firozpur are two examples of this first type. 2. Those who strip Radhaswami and Shapt yoga of its cultural moorings, and who present a streamlined modern path intertwined with any number of fashionable religious trends which may have caught the eye of the buying public. One only has to think of Leary and LSD of the 60s, Carlos Castaneda and shamanism of the 70s, Shirley MacLaine and channeling of the 80s, and UFOs and near-death experiences of the 90s, to see how trends change. John Roger Hinkins of MSIA is a prime example of this type. And 3, those who intertwine tradition with more modern Americanized approaches, and thus try to bridge Indian terminology with Western science or mysticism. Paul Twitchell, Gary Olson, Michael Turner, and Jerry Mulvin are good examples of this last type. To be sure, this threefold typology cannot cover all Shapt yoga gurus of the future. One has only to think of Ching Hai and Thakar Singh, and the previous typology breaks down. But it does lay out some major pathways that will surely be followed in the 21st century. Furthermore, in all three categories, I suspect that many more virtual gurus like Turner will appear, ones who, instead of denying their past associations as Twitchell has done, openly reveal their genealogical connections with Radhaswami. In many ways, Turner represents a new breed of gurus who have the advantage of learning to avoid all of the obvious mistakes their predecessors made, such as appropriating another guru's writings and inventing a group's history, both of which can be easily revealed. By virtual gurus acknowledging Radhaswami as their inspiration, Radhaswami may become a much more well-known tradition among religious seekers in America. And lastly, it may also be the case that Radhaswami will undergo a dramatic downsizing. Since Beas has become so large, it is nearly impossible for Gurinder Singh and other gurus who boast vast followings to have any personal contact with his disciples on a daily basis. There has already been a reaction of sorts to Beas's large Sangat. Disciples are wary of joining a guru group in which one never gets to meet or talk to the guru. Thus, smaller groups like Ajaib Singh's in Rajasthan or Jerry Mulvin's in Scottsdale will most likely fill a need for those spiritual seekers who want more intimacy and more personal contact with their chosen leader. Of course, when these same groups begin to get an influx of seekers, new gurus with smaller numbers will step in and fill the void. This has continually happened in Radhaswami's history, and I suspect that it will be even greater in the next century. Overall, the future of Radhaswami-related movements in North America looks promising. My hunch is that instead of talking about tens of shopped yoga gurus, we will be talking about hundreds, if not thousands, each of which are more or less selling the same package, with pertinent differences, of course. This raises the issue of competition in Radhasoami and shopped yoga groups as the market becomes flooded with new competitors. In places like North America, where the economy is ideally determined by free market choices, the religious field seems to be following suit. With so much head-to-head competition, which the net will certainly guarantee, the outcome should be quite interesting. Who will be the winner in this market is still a matter of speculation. But one thing seems certain. Each guru's success will depend upon his or her ability to adapt the teachings to its newfound environment.